Chapter 1027, Abhorrent Practices. Chapter 1027, Abhorrent Practices. Ling Han grabbed Guoxiuwen. He was still unconscious after being knocked out by Ling Han's 7-kill, subduing soul technique previously. This secret technique was naturally more deadly to those of a lower cultivation level. In fact, cultivators at the low extreme could be easily killed by it. Guoxiuwen's eyes shot open as he was slapped awake. However, he was completely stupefied by what he saw. Where is this? How long was I unconscious for us to have reached some unfamiliar place so far away from the island? Why you? You! He was almost scared to death upon seeing Ling Han, as the latter was completely unharmed. Did he not open the jade vial? No. I can clearly see the fragments of the jade vial in the distance, so he definitely opened it. Are you disappointed? Ling Han asked with a smile. Tell me, why should I not kill you? I'm also a victim. I was forced into doing this. Guoxiuwen said in a shaky voice. He pushed all of the blame onto Pei Ji. Ling Han shook his head and said, Perhaps you were forced to in the beginning. However, I don't see a shred of remorse in your eyes right now. You're no different from Pei Ji anymore. Little Azura, kill him. The Azura Demon Emperor immediately entered the puppet tiger and raised its tiger head and said, As you command, Master. Guoxiuwen was both shocked and confused. This puppet tiger had been created by him, and he had also used it as his steed for a long time. It could be said that he knew it through and through. However, this puppet tiger actually opened its mouth to speak just then. This almost frightened him to death. Ever since he remembered, he had never set foot outside this island, so it was only normal that he wasn't aware of the matters regarding the netherworld. As such, he found this situation completely unfathomable. You're also a puppeteer. He was convinced that he had figured out the truth. Ling Han was definitely a puppeteer who was numerous times more skilled than him, thus allowing him to easily capture his puppet and even give it the ability to speak. His supreme skills made the puppet tiger extremely lively, as if it were truly sentient and intelligent. The Azura Demon Emperor leaped over and snapped its jaws shut, crushing Guoxiuwen's neck with a single bite. Guoxiuwen's divine sense was also obliterated by this overwhelming attack, and the life drained from him in the blink of an eye. Stay by my side and don't attack without my command, Ling Han said. The Azura Demon Emperor was overcome with joy. Is Master planning to let me out? I'm so touched. Ling Han waved his hand, and the 2 people and 1 tiger immediately appeared in the workshop. This is the immortal realm, the Azura Demon Emperor said in astonishment. Although he had already guessed that Ling Han had arrived in the immortal realm after learning that his cultivation level was at the medium extreme of the mountain river tier, he was still astonished when he experienced the completely different regulations of heaven and earth and the rich spiritual qi for himself. Only a few years had passed, yet Ling Han had already advanced into the immortal level. Moreover, he could even take out a puppet at the consummate level of the mountain river tier with a casual wave of his hand. This astonished him immensely. Lead the way, Ling Han commanded. The Azura Demon Emperor hurriedly nodded and said, As you wish, Master. Now was the time for him to perform. He had to show his master just how loyal he was. He immediately opened the door and exited the workshop. Search every single room. Ling Han said, Pung. The Azura Demon Emperor rammed open the door of the neighboring room. However, apart from piles of tools and materials, there was only an empty platform in the middle of the room. There wasn't anyone there. They left the room, and the Azura Demon Emperor rammed open the door of another room. Ugh! A distressed expression appeared on Shui Yinyu's face. She immediately turned around and started to vomit. The layout of this room was identical to that of the previous 2 rooms, with piles of tools and materials sitting everywhere. There was also a platform in the middle of this room, Yet, unlike the other two rooms, there was a corpse that had been cut into 8 pieces resting on top of it. It was Fanyong. He hadn't been refined into a puppet yet, and thus his expression of terror from before his death was still frozen onto his face. The sight was enough to send shivers through one's body. In fact, Ling Han held a suspicion that Fanyong had still been alive when he had been cut into 8 pieces. How could one not be petrified as they watched their body being dissected, their organs being dug out, and their blood flowing out drop by drop? It was no surprise that the expression on his face was so twisted. This bunch of monsters. Shui Yanyu said angrily. Ling Han unleashed his divine patterns of flame and burned Fanyong's corpse into ashes. Although there was strong animosity between them, Fanyong's crimes also disappeared along with his death. Next room. The Azura Demon Emperor obediently led the way. He knew that his master was in an extremely bad mood right now, with even his tone being icy cold as if it had seeped out from an ice cave. Meanwhile, he found these sights to be extremely normal and unsurprising. Wasn't it just a dismembered corpse? The netherworld had tons of things that were hundreds, or even thousands of times crueler and bloodier than this. Pum! He rammed his way into the 4th room. There was a living person. How did you people enter? Isn't this senior brother's puppet tiger? Why is it with you guys? The person in the room was Tong Yulong, and he was currently busy with making his puppet. He had only turned around because he had heard a disturbance. A female body that was being processed lay on the platform that was already painted red with blood. Her slender legs and arms had already been severed from her torso, and her abdomen had also been sliced open. Tong Yulong was in the process of digging out her organs. This female was none other than Lu Ying. To their surprise, she still hadn't drawn her last breath yet. Her eyes slowly focused on Ling Han, and her lips trembled a little. However, she was unable to make a single sound. This didn't matter, though, as Ling Han could guess what she wanted to say: kill the monsters on this island. Also, kill her and free her from this world of pain. Kill him, Ling Han commanded coldly. The Azura Demon Emperor immediately lunged toward Tong Yulong. Roar! A puppet wolf appeared and blocked the Azura Demon Emperor's advance. This puppet was also at the consummate level of the Mountain River tier, meaning that its battle prowess was no lower than that of the Azura Demon Emperor. Ling Han took a few steps forward and cast his divine sense out like a net. Shoo! The puppet wolf instantly disappeared from the room. Pooh! Like Gua Xiuwen from before, Tong Yulong's eyes also bulged out in shock, his tongue hanging out in disbelief. Meanwhile, the Azura Demon Emperor had already arrived before him and swatted his paw over. Pa! His head was obliterated, and the headless corpse crashed to the ground with a loud thud. Ling Han swung his sword and destroyed the remnants of Lu Ying's life force. Lu Ying gave him a grateful look as she shut her eyes one final time. Then, Ling Han waved his hand and burned Lu Ying's corpse to ashes. They entered the 5th room and discovered another victim. Yang Taiching. This sturdy man had also been dismembered, with each of his limbs immersed in some sort of silver liquid. Unlike Lu Ying, however, his life force had already completely vanished. He had already been dead for quite some time. He had most likely been dismembered sometime today, as Ling Han had still seen him in the morning. Ling Han only had killing intent for Luo Wu and Fanyong, and he didn't have any good impression of Lu Ying either. After all, she had come here to kill him. However, he harbored great respect for Yang Taiching, as the latter could push his emotions aside and firmly follow his principles. There were few people who could do this. Moreover, they had battled side by side before, and he had even entrusted his back to Yang Taiching at one time. Rest in peace, Brother Yang. I'll definitely slay those monsters to appease your spirit. Ling Han said solemnly. Then he turned around and said, Let's return to our residence. Perhaps we can still save the others. Chapter 1028, Nemesis of Puppets. Chapter 1028, Nemesis of Puppets. Ling Han and Xue Yinyu hurried toward the courtyard that they had been living in. Just as they left the workshop, they saw Chueda and Yin Yuanxiang walking over together. Chueda was extremely baffled when he saw Ling Han and Xue Yinyu walk over, especially since the puppet tiger was following behind them. What's going on? Weren't they meant to capture these two people? What's with this situation? What on earth happened? This doesn't make any sense at all. Die! Ling Han roared. The Azura Demon Emperor immediately charged toward Chueda. It had to be said that he was quite smart. Ling Han hadn't explicitly said whom he wanted to kill, yet the Azura Demon Emperor directly chose to target Chueda. He probably thought that, as a man, Ling Han wouldn't want him to kill a beauty like Yin Yuanxiang. Chueda's puppet bear leaped out to battle with the Azura Demon Emperor. Brother Ling, what's the meaning of this? Yin Yuanxiang asked in confusion. Oh, you can thank me later, Ling Han said calmly. Pei Ji and his 5 disciples wanted to refine all of us into puppets, and Luo Wu, Fan Yong, Luing, and Brother Yang have all been killed already. What a load of bullsh, *T. Chueda retorted. Lady Yin, don't listen to his nonsense. He's simply accusing me with no evidence at all. I invited you because I sincerely want you to witness the beauty of newly refined puppets. I would never fathom bringing harm to you. Gua Xiuwen said the exact same thing, Ling Han said with a cold chuckle. He walked over and directly absorbed the puppet bear into the Black Tower. He didn't have the patience to argue with Chueda anymore. Chueda and Yin Yuanxiang were both astounded by Ling Han's actions. Meanwhile, the Azura Demon Emperor charged over and quickly swatted Chueda to death. Without their puppets, the battle prowess of puppeteers was truly too terrible to look at. Ling Han shook his head when saw that Yin Yuanxiang was still lost in a daze, and said, I'll explain when we gather everyone together. They hurried back to where the courtyards were located. Ning Tai and Bu Jinyun both appeared and tried to capture Ling Han. Yet both of them were swatted to death by the Azura Demon Emperor after having their puppets easily stripped away by Ling Han. Pung, pung, pung. Ling Han and the others knocked on the doors of the courtyards and called Jin Zhihui and Fu Tian out. They were still in their courtyards as they were most likely on the bottom of the list, and thus it wasn't their turn to be killed and refined yet. Meanwhile, they were also completely oblivious to what had happened around them. Ling Han recounted what they had seen just then, and the expressions of Jin Zhihui and the 2 others instantly changed drastically. I'm going to kill that old bastard. Fu Tian roared furiously. The veins on his body suddenly bulged, and the hair on his head also stood on ends as a devastating aura emanated from his body. What do you 2 think? Ling Han turned to look at Yin Yuanxiang and Jin Zhihui. Kill them all, Jin Zhihui said as he waved his fist. Yin Yuanxiang nodded, but remained silent. Very well. Ling Han drummed his fingers on the table and said, There's only the old man left right now. Puppeteers relied on their puppets to battle, yet he was coincidentally the most powerful nemesis of puppets. Moreover, the Azura Demon Emperor could enter and control any puppet. Thus, they would be able to turn their enemies' weapons into their weapons. So, even if Pei Ji owned 2 pseudo-Sun Moon tier puppets, and even if he was an elite at the consummate level of the Mountain River tier himself, Ling Han was still completely unafraid of him. Instead, he was brimming with confidence. The group of 5 set out together and started to search for Pei Ji. However, they looked around for a long time, but were still unable to find him. There's still a small workshop. Pei Ji is definitely in there. Ling Han recalled Gua Xiuwen's words and started to head toward the small workshop. This was genuinely a small workshop. It was 9 meters by 9 meters, and its door was securely shut. Fu Tian took a deep breath before ferociously charging toward the door. Pum! He slammed into the door like a powerful meteor. The door instantly shuddered and crashed to the ground. Meanwhile, Fu Tian was also pushed back. However, he simply shook his head and quickly recovered his best condition immediately. The door sent puffs of dust billowing through the air as it crashed down, and they could vaguely see Peiji resting in the embrace of a woman in the room. There was a look of intoxication and gentleness in his eyes as he caressed the face and breast of the woman. However, the female was clearly a puppet. Although her body was extremely lifelike, there were 2 black and lifeless gems where her eyes should have been. Since you've arrived here, it means that my disciples are all dead. Pei Ji wasn't flustered and had the female puppet turn him around to face Ling Han and the others. A look of contempt flashed across his face, and he scolded, "What a bunch of useless trash! Old bastard, I'm going to murder you." Fu Tian was the first to charge over, yet the female puppet merely extended an arm toward him. It seemed as if the sky were about to collapse, and it appeared as if the hand could expand without limit. Pa! The palm struck down, and Fu Tian was instantly sent flying. Blood spurted through the air as he collapsed to the ground and fainted. He didn't die after facing that attack? Pei Ji was clearly a little surprised and said, "I underestimated you people. No wonder you were able to kill all of my disciples. However, since you've come here, don't dream of leaving alive." He whistled loudly, and a middle-aged man instantly walked out from some dark corner. He was also a puppet. However, the appearance of this puppet was quite harrowing, as there were sabers and swords sticking out from all over its body, making it look like an echidna. "Kill them," Pei Ji commanded coldly. He then turned around and buried his head into the female puppet's chest, gnawing at it greedily. "Freak," Jin Jerhui said with a grimace. Was this old man a fucking necrophile? Pei Ji was still lost in lust, yet he suddenly noticed that something was off. Why was it suddenly so quiet? He turned around, and he almost wet himself in shock. It disappeared. The middle-aged male puppet had vanished. It wasn't in the sky, nor was it on the ground. Where the fuck had it gone? One had to realize that it was a pseudo-Sun Moon tier puppet. It was just as powerful as the puppet that he was embracing. The Azura Demon Emperor charged over and roared, "Die!" He had grown quite a bit, and he knew whom to attack even without Ling Han's command as the Emperor of Obsequiousness. His ability to read the mood was naturally top-notch. The female puppet struck her palm toward the Azura Demon Emperor. Pum! The Azura Demon Emperor was instantly sent flying, and even his tiger head had been twisted at an unnatural angle by the force of the strike. The gulf between their battle prowess was far too huge. The female puppet was at the pseudo-Sun Moon tier, while the puppet tiger was merely at the late stage of the consummate level. "Use this one." Ling Han casually waved his hand, retrieving the middle-aged male puppet and tossing it toward the Azura Demon Emperor. "Thank you, Master." The Azura Demon Emperor instantly transformed into a burst of demonic chi and entered the middle-aged male puppet's body. As such a powerful feeling, he waved his arms around with a smile and said, "Using a humanoid body sure is easier. What kind of monstrosity is this?" Pei Ji was stunned by the sight of the Azura Demon Emperor. He had handcrafted this puppet, so how was it captured by that person so easily? And why could it be controlled so easily? "You're a monstrosity. Eat your uncle's attack." The Azura Demon Emperor charged over again, though he didn't dare refer to himself as Emperor anymore. However, he still had the confidence to refer to himself other people's Uncle One. The female puppet dashed over, and the 2 pseudo-Sun Moon tier puppets immediately became locked in an intense battle. Pei Ji pressed down with his arms and jumped out from the female puppet's embrace. This puppet only knew how to battle, and there was no way that it could ensure his safety. If he was trapped between the two puppets, there was every possibility that he would be smashed into pieces. Humph! Even if there's only me left, killing you people will still be a piece of cake, he sneered. To everyone's surprise, segments of metal started to extend from the stumps on his severed legs, instantly causing his body to become almost 6 meters tall. Chapter 1029 Scared Away. Chapter 1029 Scared Away. Pei Ji appeared extremely strange right now. He was still a normal person down to his thighs, yet from there on downward, his legs looked like the roots of some old tree. It was a complex entanglement of metal rods, and they lifted him up to become something like a giant. Ha 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 ha! Watch how this old man annihilates you all! Like a gigantic centipede, the countless metal rods started to move and carry him toward Ling Han and the others. Everyone hurriedly dispersed to avoid being knocked over by Pei Ji's strike. Xiao, xiao, xiao! Ling Han unleashed his annihilating Dragon Star arrow and fired several volleys of Origin Power arrows. Some of these Origin Power arrows were silver-white, some were crimson-red, and some were earthen-yellow. The silver-white arrows were ordinary Origin Power arrows, while the crimson-red ones were imbued with the divine patterns of flame, and the earthen-yellow ones were imbued with the divine patterns of gravity. Pei Ji didn't dare face these arrows head-on, so he raised his leg and formed a dense net before his body that was surprisingly able to block the Origin Power arrows. Not only was this net able to block Ling Han's Origin Power arrows, but it was even able to block the attacks from the other people as well. The difference in cultivation level between them was a bit too large. Pei Ji was an elite at the peak stage of the consummate level. Yet what about Ling Han and the other 4 people? Fu Tian was unconscious. Yin Yuanxiang was at the late stage of the medium extreme, and her battle prowess was at the peak stage. Jin Zhihui was at the early stage of the medium extreme, and his battle prowess was also at the early stage. Shui Yanyu was at the peak stage of the low extreme, and her battle prowess was 1 star above her cultivation level. Ling Han was at the early stage of the medium extreme, and his battle prowess was 5 stars above his cultivation level, though his peak battle prowess could reach 6 stars. Even if they teamed up, they were still no match for Pei Ji. You brats actually dare attack me? You're all seeking death, Pei Ji said with a sneer. Shua! Ling Han cast a net as his body flashed about. He had been preparing the crimson ground-locking net this entire time, and he was finally able to fully activate it at this moment. As the net flew out, it became larger and larger. This kind of treasure was naturally able to expand and shrink a great deal. At its limit, it could even envelop a mountain, much less Pei Ji, who was only 6 meters tall. Pei Ji didn't expect this, and the small size of the workshop meant that there was no room for him to hide, either. He was instantly enveloped by the net. What? Why did my power suddenly fall so dramatically? Shock spread across his face as his cultivation level fell to the peak stage of the high extreme. His cultivation level had fallen an entire minor level. One had to realize that, as a puppeteer, he didn't possess a powerful battle prowess to begin with. Thus, he was understandably flustered now that his cultivation level had been reduced by an entire minor level. Moreover, the net that trapped him was made out of some peculiar material that he couldn't break free from no matter what. In fact, it even affected his mobility to some degree. He frantically let out a low growl, and the female puppet immediately turned around and grabbed at the crimson ground-locking net. The Azura Demon Emperor hurriedly chased over and said, "Stupid be asterisk teach, eat this uncle's saber." He removed a saber that was sticking out of his body and slashed it at the female puppet. The Azura Demon Emperor was a sleazeball, and once he put down his dignity as an elite, his shamelessness truly knew no bounds. His speech would become vile and vulgar. The female puppet simply pushed a palm backward, while her other hand latched onto the crimson ground-locking net and forcefully pulled it up. She was at the pseudo-sun moon tier, and the overwhelming strength that she possessed allowed her to lift a large portion of the net up. Meanwhile, the Azura Demon Emperor's saber slashed into her palm with a deafening clang. Everyone felt as if their eardrums were about to burst, and they were unable to hear anything else. They could only see flashes of dazzling light as the saber continued to clash against the hand. Pum! After a short while, the Azura Demon Emperor was suddenly pushed back. Although both puppets were at the pseudo-sun moon tier, it was evident that the female puppet was stronger than the male one. Pa, 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 pa. The sound of uncanny footsteps traveled over, and they saw more and more puppets climb out from all kinds of nooks and crannies. These puppets came in all kinds of strange and peculiar forms. Pei Ji pointed through the net and said, "Ha ha ha! Kill all of those people for me." There was a strong killing intent on his face, and it was clear that he was infuriated with being forced into such a sorry state. There were hundreds of these puppets already, and still more were surging out from all over the room. According to Guaxiaowen, he had lived on this island for around 30,000 years. With this in mind, Pei Ji had definitely lived here even longer than that. With so much time at his disposal, how many puppets had he managed to create? These puppets could completely be viewed as an army. Although they were lacking in intelligence, they had many other advantages. They had no weak points, no sense of pain, and no fear of death. At this moment, Fu Tian also regained his consciousness, though his battle prowess had fallen dramatically due to his severe injuries. Everyone was shaking with apprehension. There were so many puppets that it was possible that they could drown them to death. Ling Han roared and charged toward the puppets. Xiao, 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 xiao. Once he broke away from the others, he naturally became the main target of the puppets. Countless attacks streaked toward him. There were slashes from claws, explosions from sound waves, and bullets of black light. Ling Han advanced fearlessly. These puppets were mostly at the low extreme of the mountain river tier, so he didn't even need to defend against their attacks, no matter how thick and relentless they were. He simply unleashed his divine sense, causing the puppets to rapidly vanish wherever he passed. The nemesis of puppets had come. His target was the female puppet, as the Azura Demon Emperor would be freed once he captured her. When that time came, it would be extremely easy for them to suppress Pei Ji. Hurry! Hurry up and get rid of this net for me. Pei Ji screamed in exasperation. A dozen or so puppets grabbed onto the net and tried to pry it open. Meanwhile, Ling Han dashed forward and cast his divine sense toward the female puppet. Then the female puppet suddenly vanished. Pooh! Pei Ji witnessed this sight just as he broke free from the net, and his eyes almost popped out of his head in shock and disbelief. He hadn't seen how the male puppet had vanished, yet just then he witnessed the full process of the female puppet being captured. Truth be told, he was still completely baffled and unable to comprehend what was happening before him. Legless old man, watch how this uncle slays you. The Azura Demon Emperor roared with laughter as he charged toward Pei Ji. Pei Ji naturally knew how powerful this puppet was. In fright, he shouted, "Block him!" Meanwhile, he glared at Ling Han with hatred. This brat had incredibly uncanny abilities, and it seemed as if he were his fated nemesis. Yang Taicheng, great elite who had a battle prowess at the consummate level, had already been dealt with, so dealing with the remaining people should have been a piece of cake. They should have posed no threat at all, yet they somehow managed to pull off this unimaginable feat. Anyhow, old and experienced as he was, he knew that he couldn't lose his temper and throw his life away here. He immediately turned to flee, not forgetting to say, "Brat, if you pursue me, I can assure you that all of your companions will lose their lives." He laughed loudly as he fled into the distance. Ling Han hesitated briefly before turning back around to assist the others in destroying the puppets. Although there was a tremendous number of puppets here, the castaways had the Azura Demon Emperor, who was extremely powerful, as well as Ling Han, who was the nemesis of puppets. Thus, even though the puppets surged toward them in waves, They were easily mowed down, like grass being cut. After about 30 minutes, the puppets finally stopped appearing, their numbers decreasing with each puppet that was killed. Chapter 1030, True Culprit. Chapter 1030, True Culprit. With Ling Han, the puppet nemesis, present, and with the protection of the Azura Demon Emperor, who was an elite at the Pseudo-Sun Moon tier, they were finally able to exterminate all of the puppets. Yin Yuanxiang, Fu Tian, and Jin Zhihui all sighed with emotion. Were it not for Ling Han, it was very likely that they would have all died here. Regardless of how powerful or freakish they were, how could they defeat a puppet at the Pseudo-Sun Moon tier by themselves? Yang Taiching was a prime example of this. At the mention of Yang Taiching, everyone sighed in sympathy. He was someone who could stick by his principles no matter the situation. In the world of today, such a quality was truly rare and invaluable. With the battle over and done with, Fu Tian started to treat his wounds. He had gritted his teeth and participated in the battle just then, as he hadn't wanted to be a burden on everyone else. He had an extremely competitive and proud personality. "Master, should we pursue that legless old man?" the Azura Demon Emperor asked. Ling Han pondered for a moment before shaking his head and said, "Forget about it. He's the ruler of this island, and he's been here for tens of thousands of years as well. He definitely won't let us find him. But if we don't dispose of him, he'll continue to commit abhorrent crimes." Shui Yenyu said, "Then let's have a look around here to see if the old thief has left any clues," Ling Han replied. "In fact, we know nothing about that old thief. If we understand his history and personality, it will be much easier to find him." "Master is so wise," the Azura Demon Emperor said obsequiously. Ling Han glanced over and tossed a puppet bear toward him. "Enter this puppet instead." The Azura Demon Emperor was slightly confused. Wasn't his current puppet stronger? It was at the Pseudo-Sun Moon tier, and its battle prowess was several times stronger than that of the puppet bear. However, he suddenly came to a realization after seeing the look of disgust in Ling Han's eyes. As a human, his master naturally detested refining human corpses into puppets. He didn't dare disobey Ling Han, and he immediately entered the body of the puppet bear. These puppets didn't possess any free will or life force, so entering and exiting them couldn't be any easier. Ling Han incinerated both human puppets. He had only kept them to battle Pei Ji, so now that their battle was over, it was also right for him to give the deceased a proper send-off. They started to look for clues in the small workshop. Ling Han hadn't held high hopes, yet they managed to find a diary that was kept by Pei Ji. This diary detailed the process and reason for Pei Ji's abominable hobby. So it turns out that the male and female puppets were his senior brother and senior sister. The three of them were all disciples of the same puppeteer. He secretly loved his senior sister, yet she married his senior brother. He didn't let his emotions show, yet after their master died, he poisoned the two of them before restraining and then refining them into puppets. No wonder the male puppet was stabbed full of sabers and swords. It was because Pei Ji hated him tremendously. What an absolute freak. He even refined the woman that he loved into a puppet. The diary also had a detailed description of how he had refined his senior brother and senior sister. Their insults, reprimands, fury, terror, and all kinds of other things were all carefully recorded. It was as if Pei Ji wanted to relive that experience through reading his diary. What kind of hopelessness would one experience when they're betrayed by their junior brother and refined into a puppet alive? Shui Yenyu's eyes were burning with anger as she shook her head. So, one can't simply focus on talent when taking in disciples. The most important factor is still their character. Otherwise, it's no different from raising a wolf. Ling Han also sighed with emotion, yet his words sent ripples of panic through the Azura Demon Emperor's mind. Was his master giving him a veiled warning? Wang. Right at this moment, A sword light lit up and pierced toward Ling Han's back. This strike was both quick and vicious, and it was more so completely unexpected. The battle had already ended, and there were only people they had fought alongside in this room, who would suddenly attack Ling Han. Pooh! The sword pierced deep into Ling Han's body. Ling Han roared loudly and struck behind him. Meanwhile, the Azura Demon Emperor also came to his senses and hurriedly let out a growl before swinging his bare paws toward the assailant. The assailant didn't have time to retrieve their sword, so they could only release it and leap back. They instantly retreated 16 or so meters before descending like a cloud and landing lightly on their feet. The assailant was none other than Yin Yuanxiang. Ling Han! Shui Yenyu shouted in shock, and immediately held Ling Han in support as tears rolled down her cheeks. The sword had run through Ling Han's body, and only the hilt was still visible on the outside. Jin Zhihui was both shocked and enraged as he glared at Yin Yuanxiang, and he roared, What are you doing?" Only Fu Tian remained sitting on the ground, yet it was clear that his muscles were already tight with tension. Ling Han simply stared at Yin Yuanxiang. In a raspy voice, he said, "So the culprit on the ship was actually you? How so?" The careful expression that Yin Yuanxiang had worn this entire time suddenly changed into an expression of pride and arrogance. Not only that, but her aura also changed dramatically, instantly shooting up to the consummate level of the mountain river tier. Ling Han coughed a few times as his face grew even paler and said, "Just before Zhou Gaoyang died, he said that the culprit wasn't him." Yin Yuanxiang had successfully stabbed Ling Han, so she was in no hurry at all. In order to stay alive, it's only natural that he would attempt to shift the blame elsewhere. Ling Han shook his head and said, "If the culprit were him, he would have most likely only begged for forgiveness rather than try to shift the blame." Yin Yuanxiang was slightly surprised and said, "So, you started to suspect me?" "Indeed." Ling Han nodded and said, "I was thinking that since the Dark Night Hall could send an assassin, why couldn't they send two? One in the open and one in hiding?" Yin Yuanxiang hesitated for a moment before bursting into loud laughter. "Spot on. There's no need for me to deceive you any longer. I'm indeed an assassin from the Dark Night Hall. However, don't even think about buying time. That sword is covered in potent poison, and even elites at the low extreme of the Sun-Moon tier would die if they were pierced by it." Shui Yenyu was finally overcome with shock. She was extremely confident in Ling Han's regeneration ability, yet poison was a completely different story. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "I have to thank you for admitting to this. I was only suspicious before, but I'm finally certain now." He stood up and raised his left arm slightly, and the sword that was stabbed into him instantly fell onto the ground with a clang. It turned out that the sword hadn't pierced his body at all. Rather, it had merely been held between his arm and chest. "What?" The expression on Yin Yuanxiang's pretty face changed drastically, and she said incredulously, "I clearly stabbed the sword through your heart." The location was definitely right. Unless, she stared at Ling Han and continued, "unless you were prepared this entire time and had already shifted the locations of your bones." A smile blossomed across Ling Han's face, and he said, "Since I was suspicious about there being another assassin from the Dark Night Hall among us, how could I not have my guard up?" "But why did you suspect me?" Yin Yuanxiang couldn't fathom the reason, and she said, "I clearly used a secret technique to suppress my cultivation level. Even elites at the lower end of the Sun-Moon tier shouldn't have been able to see through my disguise, much less you." Ling Han nodded and replied, "Your disguise was indeed good. However, when we were surrounded by the puppets, you still ended up using power that far exceeded what you should have been capable of. That raised suspicion in my mind, and also caused me to become more wary of you." Yin Yuanxiang was slightly dazed upon hearing this answer. The situation had been so chaotic at that time, yet Ling Han still had the leisure to keep an eye on the entire battleground? What kind of freak was he? This couldn't be helped. Who told Ling Han's divine sense to be far, far superior compared to that of ordinary cultivators at the medium extreme? Since the simple method didn't work, I'll have to resort to the more difficult method. Yin Yuanxiang chuckled coldly and drew another sword as a frosty and sinister aura emanated from her body. She was an elite at the consummate level. Chapter 1031, Killing Yin Yuanxiang. Chapter 1031, Killing Yin Yuanxiang. Ling Han. Shui Yenyu's fear instantly turned into delight, and she couldn't help but tightly embrace Ling Han from behind. She had truly been scared to death just then. Jin Zhihui also breathed a sigh of relief, yet his eyes were burning with extreme fury as he glowered at Yin Yuanxiang. Generally speaking, betrayal was what people detested the most. They had gone through thick and thin together battling the demonic snakes, defending against a pirate attack, and exterminating the puppets on this island. It could be said that they had formed strong bonds of camaraderie. Yet Yin Yuanxiang suddenly betrayed them at this moment, and it felt as if a sword had been plunged into all of their backs. "Master, let me tear this *TCH to shreds," the Azura Demon Emperor offered. Ling Han nodded and said, "Fine." The Azura Demon Emperor growled and immediately lunged toward Yin Yuanxiang. He had been held captive for too long, and he had a strong desire to stretch and relax his body through battle. Anyhow, he was merely controlling the body of a puppet, so it didn't matter even if the puppet was destroyed. Ling Han had a ton of spares, and he could simply enter another puppet. He was only afraid of divine sense attacks. "You're merely a piece of trash." Yin Yuanxiang raised her sword and charged to attack. She was indeed really powerful, with a cultivation level at the peak stage of the consummate level of the mountain river tier. Although she couldn't fight above her cultivation level, her battle prowess was still the strongest among everyone present. As the saying went, a tigerless mountain would be ruled by monkeys. This was exactly the case right now. If Yang Taicheng were still alive, her only option would be to lie low and continue using her disguise. Pung, 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 Z. The Azura Demon Emperor continuously retreated, and in the end, slid over to Ling Han's feet. His momentum was only halted when Ling Han raised his foot and stepped on his body. "Are you strong enough to defeat her, or what?" Ling Han said with a chuckle. There was a bitter expression on the Azura Demon Emperor's face, and he said, "Master, she's a bit too strong." The puppet bear was only at the late stage of the consummate level, and it was an entire sub-minor level weaker than Yin Yuanxiang. As such, he had been on the back foot the entire time. "Ha ha ha ha." Yin Yuanxiang laughed loudly and said, "Who told you to pretend to be so compassionate and kind? You clearly had 2 pseudo-Sun Moon tier puppets, yet you destroyed them with your own hands. Pay, you had already used it once, so what's wrong with using it twice or thrice? Engage her. I'll cover you from behind." Ling Han kicked the Azura Demon Emperor, and the puppet bear instantly flew through the sky toward Yin Yuanxiang. 100 Ghost Sword Technique. Yin Yuanxiang let out a soft cry, and numerous ghosts materialized in the air and swooped toward the Azura Demon Emperor as she brandished her sword. Ling Han also moved. He was currently preparing the Crimson Ground-Locking Net, and as long as he trapped Yin Yuanxiang within it, her battle prowess would immediately fall to the high extreme. At that time, it would be extremely easy to capture her. "In your dreams!" Yin Yuanxiang's body danced around in a peculiar manner, making Ling Han unable to lock onto her. Once someone was prepared, it was extremely difficult to utilize treasures such as the Crimson Ground-Locking Net. "Is that so?" Ling Han smiled faintly and suddenly activated his 7-kill subduing soul technique. Divine sense attacks were formless and intangible, and their speed was also quick beyond belief. Generally speaking, they were impossible to dodge. One could only face such an attack head-on and duel to see whose divine sense was stronger and more resilient. Yin Yuanxiang was instantly hit by the attack, causing her movements to falter and her sword to stop. However, she was someone at the peak stage of the consummate level, after all, so she was only dazed for a mere fraction of a second. There was absolutely no time for Ling Han to absorb her into the Black Tower. In fact, there wasn't even enough time for him to release the crimson ground-locking net. However, the Azura Demon Emperor suddenly lunged over at this moment. He didn't swing his paws, instead choosing to give Yin Yuanxiang a tight bear hug. He was only one sub-minor level weaker than Yin Yuanxiang, so her suddenly stopping for an instant was enough time for him to take advantage of it. "Master, I've caught her!" the Azura Demon Emperor shouted excitedly. She was an elite at the peak stage of the consummate level of the Mountain River tier. Even when he had been at his strongest, he could still only kneel if he were to come across such a powerful being. He had never imagined that he would be able to hold his own against such an opponent. Yin Yuanxiang's expression suddenly changed, and she shouted, "Let go!" The Azura Demon Emperor couldn't hurt her, but Ling Han was already activating the crimson ground-locking net. She was stronger than the Azura Demon Emperor, and the puppet bear's arm was twisted at an unnatural angle as she tried to break free with all her might. It was clear that the puppet bear's bones had been snapped out of shape. If it were a normal being, they would definitely howl in pain. Moreover, how much strength could one exert if they were to suffer such unbearable pain? However, the Azura Demon Emperor didn't feel sh*t. He simply maintained his tight bear hug on Yin Yuanxiang and tried to buy as much time for Ling Han as possible. Hua! The crimson ground-locking net unfurled and fell down from above them. Yin Yuanxiang and the Azura Demon Emperor's cultivation level instantly fell by one minor level. Yin Yuanxiang unleashed her might, and bursts of sword chi shot out from her body and slashed at the Azura Demon Emperor. Her strength was still considerably above the Azura Demon Emperor's, so she was naturally at an advantage when battling against him. The body of the puppet bear became so mangled that it was barely recognizable. This was already thanks to the fact that the puppet bear had been tempered by secret techniques, causing its bones to become extremely sturdy. Otherwise, it would have already been torn to shreds by Yin Yuanxiang's ferocious and relentless attacks. Ling Han drew his bow and activated the ultimate arrow. When the arrow pointed at Yin Yuanxiang, she instantly felt a cold chill envelop her. She had a feeling that she would definitely die if Ling Han released this arrow. At this moment, she didn't have any time to ponder what kind of arrow technique this was, nor did she have time to mull over why it was so mighty and powerful. There was only a single thought running through her mind, and that was to break free from this net and avoid being shot by the arrow. Otherwise, death was the only thing that awaited her. "Let go of me! Let go of me!" Yin Yuanxiang's pretty face distorted in distress, and there wasn't a single shred of charisma about her anymore. She drew on all her strength and origin power, and even started to draw on her source power as she started to flee while carrying the Azura Demon Emperor and crimson ground-locking net. Surprisingly, her speed was actually quite quick. However, regardless of how fast she was, how could she compete against the annihilating Dragon Star arrow? Xiao! The sharp arrow pierced through the air and whizzed toward Yin Yuanxiang. Pooh! The arrow sped through the net and pierced into Yin Yuanxiang's chest, sending a plume of blood spurting through the air. The arrow continued to penetrate through her body, eventually exiting through her back and piercing into the puppet bear's body. Pum! The Azura Demon Emperor, or couldn't help but let go under the tremendous power of the blow, causing the human and bear to finally separate. "Brat, I'm going to kill." Pum! Yin Yuanxiang was just about to shout a threat, yet her entire chest suddenly exploded. Her face was filled with shock, and as she lowered her head to look at her non-existent heart, a single thought ran through her mind. Isn't this the Dark Knight Hall's explosive assassin arrow? How laughable! As an assassin of the Dark Knight Hall, I actually died at the hands of a weapon forged by my own organization. Is this retribution? Just as she finished thinking this, her entire body fell forward, dead. The Azura demon emperor transformed into his misty form and said, "Master, another puppet has been destroyed." First, the puppet tiger had been destroyed, and now the puppet bear had also been destroyed. A day had yet to pass, yet he had already destroyed 2 extremely valuable host bodies. Ling Han casually tossed a puppet wolf toward him and said, "No worries, just change into another puppet." After that, he put the crimson ground-locking net away. It was an extremely useful treasure, especially before he reached the consummate level of the Mountain River tier. I genuinely need to thank the Luo clan. If Luo Hongdao learned of his thoughts, he would definitely seethe with rage. How could it not be useful? Did Ling Han know how many resources the Luo clan had poured into forging this net? Search this place thoroughly and don't leave any stone unturned. Make sure to take everything away. Chapter 1032. Treasure that heavenly body tier cultivators fight for? Chapter 1032. Treasure that heavenly body tier cultivators fight for. Ling Han needed to prepare for 2 scenarios. What if they couldn't find Peiji anymore? This was an island, and there were only limited resources available. Only the demonic chi seemed to be limitless, appearing once every year. However, the other resources would definitely dwindle as they were used. There was simply no way that one could use the resources as they pleased. Take, for example, the godly metal that was used to strengthen puppets. Pei Ji had taken these from his master, and there was only a small amount remaining right now. If they took it away, Pei Ji would be missing a vital ingredient for puppet making. No matter how talented he was, how could he make a puppet without the necessary materials? Even if he carried some materials on him, he would only be able to make a limited amount of puppets. He would be dreaming if he wanted to recreate the large army of puppets that he'd once owned. Some of the materials were extremely valuable, which made Ling Han extremely satisfied. This was because puppet making had some relation to forging, alchemy, formations, and so on and so forth. Thus, the materials that were used for puppet making could also be used for other purposes. Ling Han sorted the materials and found that many could be sold once he returned to the capital. He was certainly going to rake in a huge amount of true origin stones. Jin Zhihui and Fu Tian both received some materials as well, though the largest portion was obviously taken by Ling Han. The 2 of them had no issues with this, as Ling Han had indeed done the most. They were basically just passengers and onlookers. Strictly speaking, they even owed their lives to Ling Han. Without him, it was very likely that they would be lying in 8 pieces in some workshop right now, forced to watch as their bodies were refined into puppets. They found a few ships, though they all were quite small. In fact, they were only a little bigger than boats. However, these ships were made from the unique demonic beasts of the sea, and they were even fitted with some strange device that allowed the ships to cut through the sea at high speed. There were 5 such ships, so each of them was able to take one. The extra ship was stowed away by Ling Han. It didn't matter whether he needed it in the future or not. The space in the Black Tower was very large anyway, so he wasn't afraid of it taking up too much room. Farewell, Brother Ling. Till later. Jin Zhihui and Fu Tian both bade Ling Han farewell. They didn't plan to return to the Tyrant Axe Harbor either. Instead, they ventured into the sea, each going their own way. Ling Han watched them disappear into the distance. Then he turned around and smiled at Shui Yenyu, saying, "Wife, it's only you and me left on this island. Should we make a bunch of kids before returning?" Shui Yenyu punched his chest in annoyance and said, "Do you think I'm a sow? Also, are we really the only 2 people on this island?" She shot a glance at the Azura Demon Emperor. The Azura Demon Emperor was given a fright, scared that Master's wife would suddenly slay him due to embarrassment. He immediately raised a leg and started to scratch his ear as any normal wolf would. It was as if his expression were saying that he wasn't a person, merely a dog. Shui Yenyu couldn't help but giggle upon seeing his expression. She had already learned of his background. Yet she was still unable to fathom how an elite at the mountain river tier could be so extremely shameless. Ling Han chortled loudly and sent the Azura demon emperor back into the Black Tower. He then pulled her over and started groping her slender and shapely body. "Damn pervert! Stop it!" Shui Yenyu murmured. Her starry eyes were extremely seductive, and her hands rested on Ling Han's chest, trying to push him away, yet also unwilling to do so. "Stop what?" Ling Han kissed her jade-like neck and lightly nibbled her earlobe, causing her slender body to suddenly tighten up and her face to suddenly flush with an alluring shade of red. "This damn pervert has figured out all my weak points." Shui Yenyu was breathing heavily as she buried her head into Ling Han's chest, and she said, "Pei Ji might still be on the island." Ling Han nodded in agreement. This was indeed a possibility, as this island was very large, after all. They had also been few in numbers, so they had been unable to thoroughly search the entire island. Perhaps Pei Ji was waiting for Ling Han and the others to leave before he returned to his workshop. Ling Han continued to grope Shui Yenyu's body as he pondered this possibility. He had already developed a habit of doing this. Shui Yenyu was slightly annoyed by this. What kind of habit is this? Why does he have to grope my chest when pondering questions? In these past few days, this damn pervert has already groped my chest for longer than I have in my entire life. We don't have time to deal with that old thief. Let's burn those courtyards down and be done with it. Ling Han finally reached a decision and said, "Let's continue to look for pirates. Now that we have our own ship, we can come and go as we please." Shui Yenyu nodded in agreement. They had killed quite a lot of pirates before, yet it had only been enough to complete a single mission. Since they had already come here, and since the mission could be completed numerous times, they might as well kill a few more pirates. They immediately sprung into action, burning the entire village and then setting off from the beach. "I wonder where that colossal pit leads to," Ling Han said. "Moreover, it even spits out a wisp of demonic qi every once in a while. We definitely have to check it out in the future and see what lies at the bottom of the pit." Shui Yenyu was also extremely curious and said, "We can't fly before reaching the heavenly body tier, so we can only come back after we break through." "I wonder if elites at the heavenly body tier can fly over this expanse of sea," Ling Han mused. Shui Yenyu wasn't sure, either, as the Shui clan didn't have any elites at the heavenly body tier. As for the heavenly body tier, cultivators of other clans who had the courage to ask them. The ship was genuinely small, and it was completely unsuited for sailing over the sea, with a single wave being capable of capsizing the ship. However, this was no ordinary ship, but a ship that had been made by puppeteers. As such, there were all kinds of small trinkets on the ship that allowed it to remain extremely stable while still being extremely quick. Ling Han and Shui Yenyu were in no hurry, either, as they enjoyed some lovey-dovey time with each other. They were only 15 or so centimeters away from becoming a true pair of husband and wife. "Ho Yang, how long are you going to flee?" A loud roar suddenly traveled over. "Ha! Ju Weiyun, do you think I'm afraid of you?" Another voice replied. "Then why are you running away?" The first voice asked. "Then let's battle. This lord is also pissed off by the insect following behind me." Ling Han and Shui Yenyu exchanged a surprised glance. They raised their heads, only to see two people standing proudly as they faced off in the sky. The ability to fly. They were great elites at the heavenly body tier. No. It was more correct to say that they were at least at the heavenly body tier. Ling Han turned to Shui Yenyu and asked, "Have you ever heard of these two people before?" Shui Yenyu pondered for a moment, and an astonished expression suddenly appeared on her face. "Ju Weiyun, Could he be the heavenly body tier elite from the eternity sky majestic empire? He's a lone cultivator, and although he's reached the heavenly body tier, he's never formed a force of his own. As for Ho Yang, I think he's a great elite from the Jade Drop Majestic Empire. Why is he facing off against Zhu Yueyun in this kind of place? Sure enough, these two people were both elites at the heavenly body tier. Otherwise, huge changes would ensue if a great elite at the Eternal River tier or Genesis tier were to appear on the joint peace planet. Judging by their previous exchange, it seems like they've already skirmished for quite a while, Ling Han said. At their cultivation, there are only two possibilities that could have led to this. The first is a grudge between them, and the second is because of a treasure. Ling Han and Shui Yinyu could see the astonishment in each other's eyes as they exchanged a glance. A treasure that could trigger a fight between two elites at the heavenly body tier was definitely incredibly valuable. Chapter 1033 Caught Up. Chapter 1033 Caught Up. Humph. The regulations of heaven and earth are extremely chaotic here, so it's genuinely an optimal place to battle. Zhu Yueyun chuckled and said, Ho Yang, if you don't want to die here, then hurry and hand the item over. Ho Yang roared with laughter and said, Zhu Yueyun, are you trying to scare this lord? You and I are both at the peak stage of the low extreme, and our battle prowess is similarly at 2 stars. If we battle with our lives on the line, it's hard to say who will be killing whom. I only know that if you don't hand the item over, this will be the resting place for your corpse. Zhu Yueyun threatened in a sinister voice. Is this really necessary? Ho Yang asked. That item can't be opened anyway. Are you really willing to bet your life and tens of millions of years of cultivation on some unknown item? Zhu Yueyun flared up in rage and said, You and I discovered that item together, and we even agreed to examine it together. However, you took advantage of the moment when I wasn't paying attention, and actually fled with the item. How can I swallow this anger if I don't kill you? Ho Yang chuckled and said, I didn't think that you would actually be so naive. No wonder you've spent all of your time on cultivation and been lonely this entire time. You're stupid beyond belief. Die. Zhu Yueyun roared in anger and lashed out at Ho Yang. Boom! Devastating flashes of light instantly exploded throughout the sky as bursts of overwhelming shock waves surged out from the battle. Like a giant mountain, a roaring wave that measured hundreds of meters tall crashed through the sea. Fuck! We're going to be caught up in the shock waves from their battle. Ling Han grimaced. Their luck was truly terrible. There were so many places that the two heavenly body tier elites could have battled, yet they somehow managed to choose the sky directly above them. Weren't they two innocent bystanders going to suffer for nothing? However, now that it had come to this, their only option was to endure. Ling Han held his sword in his hand as he stood at the bow of the ship and awaited the giant wave that was surging toward them. When the wave arrived, he gave a loud roar and ferociously slashed down, forcefully carving out a narrow gap in the wave and allowing their ship to pass. Shwa, shwa, shwa. He continued to slash his sword down. This wave was far too large, and each slash that he performed could only open a gap that ran 30 meters deep. He needed to continuously slash at the wave to ensure that it didn't close in on them. The ship finally sailed through the wave, and Ling Han was so tired that he could barely raise his arms. The seawater here was extremely peculiar, with each drop being as heavy as a mountain. So, how terrifying was a surging wave! Moreover, the wave had been triggered by two elites at the heavenly body tier, so it naturally contained a shred of the heavenly body tier's might. It was already a minor miracle that Ling Han had been able to navigate the ship through it, and it would have been beyond comprehension if he hadn't been completely beat and exhausted. Boom! 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 Before Ling Han could even recover his breath, several new waves suddenly formed and started to surge toward them. Taking a quick glance, there were at least several hundred gigantic waves. Holy fuck! Ling Han wanted to give up and send the ship into the Black Tower. Meanwhile, he and Shui Yinyu could take cover underwater. They could resurface when the two elites finished their battle, then take their ship out and set off for their destination again. However, coming across a battle between two elites at the Heavenly Body Tier was a rare opportunity, and watching them battle would definitely be especially beneficial to his own cultivation. Thus, Ling Han gritted his teeth and continued to endure. He continued to unleash the 10,000 techniques returned to one to slash the giant waves apart. Fortunately, his power had also increased considerably along with the elevation of his cultivation level. Thus, although the might of the 10,000 techniques returned to one was significantly reduced, its toll on him had also become much lower than before, allowing him to keep enduring. Of course, the most important factor was still his sturdy physique and astonishing stamina. Otherwise, if he'd been an ordinary cultivator at the Mountain River Tier, his arms would have already become numb and limp. Ling Han persevered, and under the strong intensity of the waves, his willpower was also steeled. A burning fighting spirit raged within him, and he felt as if he could even battle against an elite at the Heavenly Body Tier. Meanwhile, the battle in the sky became more and more intense as both elites began to unleash their true powers. Dark clouds swarmed about, blotting out the sun. Then, in the next instant, flames seared through the air and transformed it into a sea of fire, appearing as if it were about to incinerate the sky and evaporate the sea. Elites at the Heavenly Body Tier were far too powerful. Ling Han felt as if he were a mere ant. No, he felt even worse than a mere ant. If either of the two people wanted to kill him, they would be able to do so with a single glance, not even needing to lift a single finger. Power. This is true power. There was a strong hunger in Ling Han's mind as excitement surged through his body. He was unable to see the battle in the sky clearly as the two elites soared about and unleashed their complete strength. The sky was burning and the sea was boiling. This place had become like hell on earth. Fortunately, the two elites wandered further and further away from Ling Han and Shui Yenyu's position. Otherwise, Ling Han definitely wouldn't have been able to block the devastating shock waves that were being generated by their intense battle. Boom! An extremely thick column of light suddenly shot out from the sea and soared into the sky. Such was its astounding might that it could even be seen from hundreds of kilometers away. Hoyang chuckled and said, "Jui Weiyin, a historical site was opened by us. Why don't you head over and explore it? This lord won't compete with you." Bullsh *T. That site is only at the Sun-Moon Tier. How can it compete with the value of that box? Zhu Weiyin roared angrily. It's completely worthless. It can't be opened anyway. Then why are you keeping it? Give it to me. This lord likes this kind of strange and peculiar things. Fuck off. The two of them started to battle again, the intensity of their battle even greater than before. Blood sprayed from their bodies and instantly dyed the sky red, even transforming into a boundless blood rain that was brimming with terrifying killing intent. Numerous creatures in the sea became unfortunate victims, dying violently as their bodies came into contact with the blood rain. This was Heavenly Body Tier blood, and being struck by a drop of such blood was like being struck by a heavenly body one. It was extremely terrifying. Ling Han had naturally placed Shui Yinyu and the ship into the Black Tower already, and he had also entered it himself. The surging waves carried them along, and they were submerged into the sea at times and were tossed into the air at others. The Black Tower was like a mustard seed, and even the extreme weight of the gravity fields was unable to affect it. In fact, it was resistant to all powers, and thus the regulations in this sea were completely ineffective against it. Shoo! A small dot of light suddenly fell down from the sky. Ling Han had a sharp eye, and he instantly determined that it was a white jade box. It plopped into the sea and then started to sink rapidly. Is that what the two Heavenly Body Tier elites were fighting over? Ling Han's heart thumped with excitement. He couldn't snatch something from a heavenly body tier elite, but this treasure had been knocked out of their hands now, giving him a chance to obtain it, though it had landed quite far away. Before Ling Han could even exit the Black Tower, Zhu Yueyin and Ho Yang had already shot down from the sky and plunged into the sea. They continued to skirmish as they chased after the white jade box, and both of them wanted to break free and move in front of the other. However, the gravity was immense here, and the jade box sunk at a tremendous speed. Ling Han lost sight of it in no time at all, and the two powerful elites also disappeared from his sight in a flash. Meanwhile, the Black Tower continued to drift along the sea, unseen and undetected by others. Ling Han's mind whirred, and he finally made a decision. He resolutely leaped out of the Black Tower. An overwhelming weight instantly bore down on him, dragging him deeper and deeper into the sea. This was exactly what he wanted. Chapter 1034, Seabed. Chapter 1034, Seabed. It would naturally be best if Ling Han could obtain the jade box. Even if he couldn't, he still wanted to explore the seabed where the column of light had shot out from. After learning of the Star Sea's history, Ling Han had already developed a strong interest in its seabed. With his outstanding fortune, perhaps he would be able to find some inheritance or interrealm treasure. The two elites had said that the phenomenon caused by the column of light represented the reappearance of a sun-moon tier abode. They weren't interested, yet Ling Han was. I'll look for the jade box first, and then explore the abode. 30 meters, 300 meters, several hundred meters. Ling Han continued to sink toward the seabed. As he descended further and further, the surrounding environment also became increasingly dim. However, unlike other seas, the depths of the Star Sea were only dim, with the light still present no matter how deep he descended. This was because of the tremendous gravity fields here. They were so powerful that even the refraction of light was forced to undergo some kind of extraordinary change. Light was pulled toward the bottom of the sea and was unable to refract back to the surface one. Meanwhile, Ling Han was also experiencing crushing pressure. The water pressure is so terrifying. There was some kind of indescribable regulation here. If one were to scoop up some seawater, they would find that there was absolutely nothing special about it. Upon entering the sea, however, one would discover that every single drop of water weighed as much as a mountain. With power at the mountain river tier, one could easily endure the weight and pressure of a few mountains. However, every drop of water in the Star Sea was like a mountain, making it an insanely terrifying prospect. Most importantly, the water pressure would increase the further one descended. At great depths, one wouldn't feel like they were being crushed by mountains anymore. Rather, they would feel as though they were being crushed by a heavenly body. If cultivators fell into the sea, they would have to activate an origin power barrier to protect themselves. Otherwise, they would be crushed into pulp in no time at all. It was no wonder that people couldn't stay in submerged the sea for too long. After all, they would be facing certain death once they expended all of their origin power. Ling Han had initially planned to descend to the bottom and spend a few years walking back to shore. After experiencing the water pressure, however, he realized just how naive his plan had been. Of course, Ling Han was no ordinary person. First of all, he had a tremendously powerful physique. At the very least, he was still able to withstand the crushing pressure at this moment. It was just that his bones were already cracking and groaning under the immense stress. Secondly, he still had the Black Tower. So, even if expended all of his origin power, he would still be able to enter the Black Tower to recover. After reaching a depth of 3,000 meters, the surroundings finally became pitch black. 3,300 meters, 3,600 meters, 3,900 meters. Ling Han continued to venture deeper and deeper. If others learned of this, their jaws would definitely drop, slack open in shock. People did indeed come to this sea to search for lost treasures that lay on the seabed. However, they would normally only explore the shallower regions of the sea. The limit was set at roughly 3,000 meters. Past this depth, the region of the sea would be labeled as the deep sea. The deep sea was incredibly dangerous, and just the water pressure alone would be able to crush most mountain river tier cultivators. Moreover, there were even devastating demonic beasts at such depths, and it was nothing special to come across one at the Sun Moon tier. One could lose their life at any moment. How much of their power could cultivators exert in such a harsh environment? 4,800 meters, 5,100 meters, 5,400 meters. When Ling Han reached a depth of 6,000 meters, the surroundings suddenly became brighter. This luminance was given off by the fish in the sea. To Ling Han's surprise, their scales were actually able to emit light. When they swam in schools, they would be able to illuminate the entire space around them. What a dazzling sight! 7,500 meters, 8,400 meters. After reaching this depth, Ling Han's godly bones were finally unable to withstand the overwhelming pressure, and he had to channel his origin power to push back against the pressure. However, his origin power was being drained at a rapid rate. He retrieved a true origin stone and absorbed its energy as he continued to resist the pressure. 9,000 meters. Ling Han finally reached the seabed. The seabed wasn't flat, instead looking like a hilly range that was full of rises and falls. Like the fish from before, there were numerous stones that emitted light and illuminated the sea. This was a beautiful world, and if it weren't for the crushing pressure, Ling Han would really have loved to bring Shui Yinyu out to enjoy the stunning scenery together. It was a pity that Shui Yinyu didn't have a sturdy physique like him. Moreover, she was only at the peak stage of the low extreme, meaning that she wouldn't be able to withstand the devastating pressure of the sea anyway. If she came out, she would instantly be crushed into pulp. In the distance, there was a radiant glow that could be seen clearly even from very far away. That was the Sun Moon tier abode. Ling Han barely hesitated before swimming toward the column of light. As for the jade box, he could only leave that to luck. After all, the two elites at the heavenly body tier had come down before him. With their powerful abilities, they had definitely examined this area several times already. If the jade box had landed here, they would have already found it. Thus, he could only leave this to fate. Perhaps the heavens would favor him and make the jade box appear before his feet. He walked forward with great difficulty. His speed had fallen drastically after he arrived on the seabed, and if others saw him, his rigid and clumsy movements would surely elicit their laughter. He advanced slowly. If he were on the surface of the sea, he would have been able to cover this distance in a mere 10 minutes. Now, however, he had to spend almost half a day. Finally, an expanse of ruins appeared before him, one of its corners radiating with a dazzling light. This is probably a mountain gate. He could clearly tell that this place used to be a mountain. However, half of the mountain peak had already been sliced off. Meanwhile, most of the mountain had also sunken into the seabed. As a result, only a small portion of the mountain remained sitting in the water. A stone pillar that measured at least 30 meters in thickness and 300 meters in height stood at the waist of the mountain. This stone pillar was the source of the dazzling column of light. There was a cave entrance next to the stone pillar, and there was also some dim light radiating from within it. However, the light from the cave entrance appeared extremely insignificant when contrasted against the brilliant and piercing light from the stone pillar. Ling Han swam over and tried to enter the cave to explore it. However, a strong current suddenly surged over as a gigantic shark appeared before him. Rings of golden vein patterns decorated the shark's colossal body. This was a golden patterned shark, a demonic beast at the consummate level of the mountain river tier. Surprisingly, a contemptuous smile tugged at the golden patterned shark's lips as it discovered Ling Han. After reaching the mountain river tier, demonic beasts would have naturally developed intelligence already. In the shark's eyes, Ling Han was so weak that he was almost insignificant. However, the shark still swished its tail and shot toward Ling Han like an arrow, opening its mouth to bite as it did so. There was a loud snapping sound as it snapped its mouth shut. However, a confused look instantly appeared on its face. For some reason, it hadn't been able to bite into anything. The minuscule human had disappeared. The shark scanned its surroundings, yet it eventually gave up on its search. Instead, it swam toward the cave entrance. It had also been drawn here by the dazzling column of light. However, the clash between the two heavenly body tier elites just then had caused it to almost wet itself, so it hadn't dared venture over. Only after the two auras had disappeared for a long time did it dare swim back to this place. There were several other beings that had the same mindset as the shark. Glancing around, one could see that a turtle, crab, seahorse, and octopus had also appeared in the surroundings. These demonic beasts were all of similar strength. Thus, they didn't engage in battle, instead conversing using their divine sense after facing off for a short while. They then entered the cave one by one. "Ha!" The demonic beasts all exclaimed in astonishment when they arrived inside the cave. They discovered that the cave wasn't filled with water, but was a dry space instead. Chapter 1035, It's Mine Now. Chapter 1035, It's Mine Now. "This is the abode of a great human elite," the turtle said. No. This is most likely a mountain sect that has had most of the regions inside destroyed," the seahorse said. "Only this one place still remains." "This place definitely holds rare treasures," the other demonic beasts exclaimed in unison. They all communicated with their divine senses, and thus they were able to converse directly and overcome the difficulties posed by the language barriers between them. "The treasures of humans might not be useful for us," the crab said. It was a demon-faced crab, and there was a demon-like pattern on its shell. It was in human form right now, yet its pair of huge pincers still remained in their original form. The bodies of demonic beasts were akin to God tools. This was heaven's blessing to them. Of course, they wouldn't mind owning a few more God tools, either. "Hee, you can leave if you want. I don't mind using the treasures of humans," the prawn said. It was a black armored prawn that had a pitch-black body and an extremely sturdy shell. In fact, its outer shell was as sturdy as similarly ranked godly metal. This prawn could also shape-shift into human form, with a thick layer of black armor covering its body when it did so. This armor was transformed from none other than its outer shell. This was a residence built by humans, so it was unsuitable for the demonic beasts to enter in their original form, which was relatively huge. Moreover, this wasn't a water environment, meaning that assuming human form would naturally be the most suitable. The demon-faced crab humphed and said, "There's no need for you to stick your nose into this Lord's matters. Fine. There are many hidden dangers here. So I say that we look for the treasures first, then decide how to divide them among us," the octopus suggested. She was the only female here, and her gray hair was plaited into dozens of braids. However, looking closely, one could see that each braid was actually a tentacle that was gently swaying about. She was a gray cloud octopus. "I agree. Let's look for the treasures first." The demonic beasts reached a consensus and started exploring the ruins. It's been too long, and all of the valuable things have already crumbled to dust. Damn it, this is the constellation illusion grass, a level 5 godly medicine. If there were enough, I would be able to break through to the sun-moon tier. This is a peculiar radiant stone, and it can temper one's godly bones. It's a shame that it's already turned into dust. Otherwise, it could have raised my armor's defense by an entire cultivation level. Heavens, this is a 4-emperor pill. The wails and agonized cries of the demonic beasts continued to echo throughout the ruins. They were stunned by the amount and rarity of the treasures here, yet they were also filled with a deep grief as all of these treasures had already crumbled, turning into dust. There wasn't a single item that remained in optimal condition. This treasure storage was divided into several smaller rooms, and they went through each of these rooms one by one. They arrived at the final room, and all they found there was a single stone slab. This stone appeared extremely ordinary. This was also the demonic beast's first reaction. This stone was far too ordinary, not even giving off the slightest of lusters. This was the kind of stone that wouldn't attract a second glance if it were tossed onto the ground with other stones. The problem was, would one really place such an ordinary stone inside a treasure storage? It would be hard to determine if there was nothing to compare it to. However, the treasures in the other rooms were all at the sun-moon tier, and only this room housed a stone that appeared extremely ordinary. How could the demonic beasts not be suspicious? "What on earth is this thing?" a demonic beast asked curiously. "How about we examine it first? There's no need for us to fight over it before we learn of its functions," the demon-faced crab suggested. "Agreed." The demonic beasts all shuffled over. No one dared to attack, as they had already reached a consensus. If anyone dared to make a move, they would definitely become the target for everyone else. However, this stone was truly as normal could be, even seeming extremely irregular in some places. It appeared as if it had been chipped off from a larger boulder. The demonic beasts tapped it and ran their hands over it, yet there was absolutely no reaction from the stone. However, their expressions changed drastically when they started attacking the stone. This was because attacking the stone was like attacking air, with the stone remaining firm and unmoving no matter how they attacked it. Although we're unaware of what other functions the stone has, just the fact that it can absorb attacks is already extremely shocking, the gray cloud octopus exclaimed. This stone slab wasn't just sturdy. The most astounding part was that it could actually absorb attacks. The faces of the demonic beasts were all filled with greed. Even if this stone slab had no other uses, just the fact that it could absorb attacks was already beyond extraordinary. Schwa! Several hands instantly grabbed at the stone. Now that they knew of its effect, everyone naturally wanted to obtain the stone for themselves. If they could use this stone as a shield, the strength of their defenses would definitely increase manyfold. "Move aside! It's mine!" The demonic beasts roared at each other as they fought over the stone. This was naturally a chaotic battle. Every single demonic beast was aiming for the stone slab, so they didn't have any intention of killing their opponents. However, whenever someone obtained the stone slab, they would instantly be surrounded and attacked by everyone else. Thus, even if there were demonic beasts who were slightly stronger, they still held no advantage at all in such a chaotic battle. Pum! Right at this moment, however, the golden-patterned shark's body suddenly exploded. The other demonic beasts were all given a fright. What happened? No one targeted him, so how did he suddenly die? At this moment, a figure suddenly appeared and reached toward the stone slab. It was none other than Ling Han. He hadn't lingered in battle just then, and had directly entered the Black Tower instead. However, he'd been swallowed into the golden-patterned shark's belly along with some seawater. Just then, he exited the Black Tower and unleashed his full strength, immediately causing the golden-patterned shark to explode into pieces. So what if it was a demonic beast? Its internal organs were still extremely fragile and vulnerable. Human! Damn it! The other demonic beasts were all shocked and infuriated. Although they didn't belong to the same race and weren't especially friendly with each other, they were all sea demons after all. Even though they'd attacked each other at times, they were definitely firm allies when it came to fighting against external enemies. Moreover, Ling Han was actually trying to snatch the stone slab. They all attacked in unison. The tentacles of the octopus, pincers of the crab, and claws of the turtle all struck at Ling Han. Ling Han was merely at the early stage of the medium extreme, so he appeared extremely insignificant in the eyes of the demonic beasts. He had somehow managed to kill the golden-patterned shark just then, but such an event would definitely not happen a second time. Pung! Their attacks all slammed into Ling Han's back, and each of the 5 attacks was at the consummate level of the mountain river tier. They were confident that no one at the medium extreme could withstand such an attack. However, although Ling Han spat out a huge mouthful of blood, his speed became even quicker as he shot forward and grabbed the stone slab with his hand. What? The 5 demonic beasts were all stunned. How was this possible? This human was merely at the medium extreme, so any single one of them should have been able to blast him into pieces, much less all 5 of them together. How did he only spit out a mouthful of blood? People all said that demonic beasts had powerful physiques. However, by the looks of it now, it appeared as though this human was the true demonic beast. Ling Han landed on the ground, stumbling forward a few steps before he caught himself. Searing pain burned across his back. Although his physique was on par with level 3 godly metal, he still felt a significant amount of pain after being hit by 5 consummate level demonic beasts. He couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood, and then another 2 mouthfuls of blood. Only then did he feel a little better. It hurts so fucking much. Ling Han shouted in his mind. However, the stone slab was finally his now. He wouldn't be afraid of losing it, even if a heavenly body tier elite came over right now. Sorry, but this stone slab is mine now. Chapter 1036, The Unfortunate Pei. Chapter 1036, The Unfortunate Pei. Put down the stone slab, and we can spare you, the gray cloud octopus uttered coldly. Her whole head of tentacles was lightly dancing. At first, they were only about a foot long, but now they extended to about 3 meters long, just as if they were spiritual serpents. Demon-faced crab, black armored prawn, the giant turtle, and the seahorse were all staring at Ling Han, their eyes extremely unfriendly. Although this human's physique was very amazing, it was definitely not something that could not be broken through. If that had not been the case, he would not have been throwing up blood continuously when he had been on the receiving end of their combined attacks just now. Even if that stone slab possessed the special effect of absorbing attacks, it was only about the size of a human palm. At most, it would only be capable of protecting 1 vital point. In terms of battle prowess, the 5 of them were at a complete advantage, and if they worked together, they would still be able to easily eliminate this human. Ling Han snickered and said, "Let's exchange a few blows first." He took the initiative to charge, brandishing his sword in an attack. Damn it! The 5 demonic beasts all flew into rage, and they shot out their respective attacks at Ling Han. Ling Han's purpose was to test out the uses of this stone slab. After all, he had hidden in the Black Tower previously, and thus had only gotten very vague information. Pung, 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 pung. The attacks shot over, and Ling Han took out the stone slab to block to the right and parry on the left, instantly absorbing the various attacks. It was like a sponge soaking in water, making no sound and frighteningly quiet. He was involuntarily surprised. His physique was very tough, but after enduring an attack that exceeded the limits of his power, he would still be forced back or even be sent flying, completely unlike now when he was able to disperse even the attack from an elite cultivator at the peak stage of consummate level. This was too inconceivable. However, though the stone slab's effect was unnatural, with the combined attacks from 5 great elites, Ling Han could not possibly handle everything, and still suffered quite a number of attacks, causing him to once again throw up blood repetitively. His purpose was to test out the stone slab, and since he already knew the effects, there was naturally no further purpose to continue the battle for no reason. Ling Han was just about to enter into the Black Tower when he saw another person enter into the treasure trove. What first came into sight was the legs that looked like tree roots constructed of innumerable metal rods. Then it was an old man who had lost the lower half of his body, and it was connected atop these metal rods. Pei. Obviously, he, too, had discovered that a pillar of light had shot skywards from here, and thought that a secret treasure had appeared. Hence, he had rushed here with all impatience. Big Brother Pei, great! Quick! Come and help me block these people. Ling Han called out loudly. Ling Han! Pei Ji couldn't help but be surprised. He had never imagined that he would see Ling Han here. Was this brat a portent of calamity for him? Why was it that he would see the latter everywhere he went? Ling Han pounced over, but at the instant he neared, he flashed right into the black tower. Immediately, Gray Cloud Octopus, Demon-Faced Crab, and the other great elites all turned their eyes to Pei Ji. Where's the brat? They asked icily. If that stone slab could be used appropriately, then the value it exhibited would be incredibly astonishing. Pei Ji was baffled. At first he had thought Ling Han was mocking him by calling him Big Brother, but when he saw the extremely unfriendly eyes of these five, he knew that he had been done in by Ling Han. Ling Han had diverted the disaster onto him. Damn it, exactly what utterly horrible thing had that brat done that it would implicate him as well? Ho, I shall not lie to you. Not only am I not friends with that damnable brat, we are enemies. I, too, want to kill him and delight in his death afterwards. Pei Ji took a few steps back, not daring to be the slightest bit careless. He was even more displeased internally. If it were not for the fact that his two pseudo-Sun Moon tier puppets had been snatched away by Ling Han for some inexplicable reason, he would have been able to easily suppress these 5 animals. So what need would there be for him to be as cautious as he was now? Humph! The words of humans should never be trusted. Demon-Faced Crab said coldly. That's right. Though this old man is already crippled and does not have much youthful vitality, either he is still in existence of the consummate level after all. Devouring his blood essence would still be a little nutritious. Gray Cloud Octopus stretched out her foot-long tongue and licked her lips. Pei Ji was stunned and quickly went into a defensive position. He said, Everyone, I am not one easily to be trifled with either. If you want to kill me, at least one of you would die with me. Is that right? The 5 demonic beasts made their moves at the same time and attacked Pei Ji simultaneously. Pung! The moment they made their move, Pei Ji was completely at a disadvantage and ended up being horribly thrashed by the 5 demonic beasts. His battle prowess only matched his cultivation level, or was even a bit weaker than that. The majority of demonic beasts, though, could reach the standard of battle prowess they should have. A great many even possessed battle prowess that exceeded their cultivation levels by a star because of their tenacious body and unique anatomy. Hence, with only him against a large number of enemies, and furthermore being dominated in terms of battle prowess, Pei Ji was naturally even worse off. Pooh! He spat out blood madly. As a puppeteer, he himself was weak in actual battle. However, his strongest 2 puppets had been taken by Ling Han, so he had only had a few puppets left to cover him while he fled, but they were all in the low extreme. This kind of puppet absolutely could not dive into the deep sea, and they had long been crushed by the underwater pressure. Furthermore, he could not store them into his spatial spirit tool. Hence, he was really all by himself now. The situation now was practically disadvantageous to him to the utmost. A mere human. Just a human. The 5 demonic beasts all smirked coldly. Pei Ji's inability to withstand a single blow finally helped them recover their lost confidence. The brat just now was, after all, an exceptional case, and the majority of humans were still normal. Pei Ji was extremely depressed. He had not seen any treasures after rushing all the way here, and was now being targeted by the combined attacks of 5 elites. This was practically baffling and extremely depressing. That despicable brat, it was all his fault. His fault entirely. 100 flowers dancing wildly. Pei Ji delivered a powerful move. Innumerable metal legs bloomed like they were the petals of a flower, the power of the attack extremely shocking. What mood did he have to linger in the battle? He planned to deliver a powerful move to cut a path of blood out and flee. Whatever treasure there was, he did not want it any more. Humph! Turtle stepped out to block his attack. His body shook and instantly became a few times bigger, forcibly taking this attack head-on. Pung, 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 pung. A series of attacks fell, but merely created brilliant sparks on that turtle's back, completely unable to break through his defenses. Turtle was the demonic beast with the strongest defenses. There was practically none that could match it. Pei-Ji almost spat out blood. He had shot out a powerful move, yet only one the elites from the other side was enough to block it forcefully. Die! Demon-faced crab and the other three immediately followed through with an attack. Schwa! Countless octopus tentacles stretched out, while giant crab pincers and prawn pincers clamped down. They were all covered with divine patterns and flickered with divine light. Ah! Pei-Ji released a horrible scream. Though he was defending with all his might, there were too many enemies and they were too strong. One of his arms was instantly cut off, and over a dozen bloody holes appeared on his chest. Thankfully, his vital points had been missed. Otherwise, he would definitely have died with their single attack. The 5 great demonic beasts did not pull any punches. Another attack blasted over, intending to end Pei-Ji's life. Apologies, this person is guilty of terrible crimes, and I must kill him personally. Ling Han appeared, the ultimate arrow already activated. The 5 great demonic beasts all felt their hair stand on ends, if they had any. This arrow made them feel a powerful threat. If they did not defend with all their might, even they would be severely injured or possibly even instantly killed. Without waiting for them to form their second thought, Xiu, the arrow had already shot forth with all its fury. No, Pei-Ji only managed to widen his eyes, and an arrow had shot into his chest. The tail of the arrow flashed past and directly flew out through his back. Chapter 1037, Absolute Beginning Stone. Chapter 1037, Absolute Beginning Stone. If Pei-Ji had still been in his prime, then even if he was unable to dodge this arrow, he would at least have been able to avoid a critical hit to his vitals. However, he had been ganged up on by 5 great demonic beasts and had already received severe injuries, with his battle prowess taking a drastic drop. How would he have been able to avoid this arrow? He looked at his chest with slight confusion, then pointed at Ling Han and uttered, "Brat, I will definitely tear you into pie." Pa! He had not finished saying the word pieces when his chest suddenly exploded. It was impossible for him to ever finish that final word. His expression was filled with unwillingness. He collapsed heavily onto the ground, his blood spilling all over. This treasure trove was obviously incredibly sturdy. The battle just now had not damaged it in the slightest. And now, the blood of a mountain river tier cultivator was naturally unable to damage it, either. Many shadows embodiment technique. Ling Han babbled, and Xiu entered into the Black Tower. Damn it! The 4 powerful demonic beasts were all furious. They had been tricked once by Ling Han just now, and now, for some inexplicable reason, they allowed him to escape. They had really lost face here. What kind of movement technique is that? How could it be so strange? We have fallen for his trick. This old human bastard was not in the same group as that little bastard. Instead, they were enemies. Damn it, we've been used. Without us acting, that little bastard would definitely not have been able to kill that old bastard. We've been horribly tricked. The 5 demonic beasts were in a towering rage, but now that Ling Han had disappeared without a sign, what else could they do? After raging for a while, they left one by one. The extraordinary images here were incredible, and might attract even more powerful demonic beasts. By that time, their only fate would be devoured. Ling Han, too, came out of the Black Tower. He left the treasure trove and followed the crowd. He once again entered into the Black Tower to study that mysterious stone slab. Small tower, do you know what this is? Small tower's figure surfaced. It lightly swayed and replied, "This is the absolute beginning stone." Ling Han asked because he wanted to try his luck and maybe get an answer. He had not thought that Small Tower would really know it, however, so it stunned him for a moment. Then he continued, "Tell me more details." Small Tower humphed and finally replied, "In the beginning, when the heaven and earth split, it was among the most ancient stones, and is an evolution of the Chaos Source Rock." Ling Han knew of the Chaos Source Rock. Previously, when he had still been in the lower realm, he had obtained a large piece Azura Demon Emperor, kept constantly. Furthermore, he had even managed to trick the latter heavily because of it. "Then it is an incredible treasure!" he exclaimed, slightly excited. "Sorry, aside from the fact that it's a bit old and a bit sturdy, the absolute beginning stone does not have any special property. It is merely a material used to record history." Small Tower immediately interrupted. "Ah!" Ling Han was immediately disappointed. This was something he had snatched back when he fully knew he faced the risk of being heavily thrashed, and it actually could not be considered a treasure. "Hold on." Ling Han immediately said, "That's not right. No power can penetrate this stone, and it can absorb all power, so how would one be able to carve words on this?" "Ho ho! Since it cannot be penetrated by any power, how could it have been shattered into pieces, then?" Small Tower countered. "This—" Ling Han nodded and said, "Even if it is the absolute beginning stone, there should be a maximum limit to the power of the attacks it can absorb. When the power has exceeded this limit, even the absolute beginning stone would only be shattered. So the child can be taught." Small Tower put on an air of maturity. However, the Black Tower had existed for who knew how many millions, or perhaps it should even be counted in billions or trillions of years, so it did indeed have the right to act mature. Though the absolute beginning stone is no treasure because its history spans very far back, it is treated by many as a plaque of greatness to sing praise of the feats their ancestors have achieved. So it could still be considered quite a rarity, Small Tower continued. Ling Han sighed and said, "Though I feel quite good about myself, I am still not so arrogant as to set up a plaque to sing praise for myself. I'll just use this thing as a shield." "Oh, right. What kind of power could break it?" "Power of the Genesis tier would be able to break it," Small Tower replied. Ling Han's eyes widened, and he said, "Then wouldn't it have to be someone of the Genesis tier?" Small Tower did not reply, apparently thinking that this question was very stupid, so it could not even be bothered to answer. "Then this shield is really quite useful. Unfortunately, it's too small." Ling Han appeared quite satisfied because this stone slab was completely capable of absorbing attacks, and if properly used, it would show amazing effect. But because it was too small, if he encountered a powerful demonic beast that used its mountain-like body to smash him, it would be a complete waste, as it would not be able to protect him at all. When met with the punch of an elite, or even transformed into something akin to a star, it would be completely ineffective as well. That would depend on how it's used. Ling Han came out of the Black Tower. Immediately, the terrifying water pressure surged over. He tried to use the absolute beginning stone, and it was really effective. Wherever he placed it, the pressure there would disappear completely. Unfortunately, he could only protect a spot about the size of his palm. Ling Han simply treated it like a protection for his heart. The heart, the head, and Dantian were the three most crucial vital points of any cultivator. Losing the first two could be fatal, whereas the Dantian was the source of one's power. If it was broken, then one would be equivalent to a cripple. He began to float towards the surface of the sea. Because there was powerful gravity, the buoyancy also seemed to have completely disappeared. The speed that he was floating upwards at was very slow. Boom! The waters rippled, and a huge demonic beast suddenly appeared ahead of him. It was a giant crocodile that possessed as many as 6 legs and was over 900 meters long. It was completely covered in scales that were even larger than the lid of a well. Merely its tail alone was more than 300 meters long. Ling Han could see it because its two eyes were shining with light like two balls of fire. At the same time, he also felt an indescribable pressure. The Sun Moon Tear. The giant crocodile had also discovered his presence and immediately accelerated with a swing of its tail, opening its mouth to eat him. Ling Han did not have any intention of escaping by a fluke. He directly ducked into the Black Tower. If this huge mouth bit down, it was definitely not something that could be blocked by the absolute beginning stone. It might not even be able to fully protect his heart, and the other parts of his body would be turned into mush. The huge crocodile's mouth snapped shut with a loud sound, but a hint of confusion shone in its eyes because it had not bitten anything at all. Who? The sea waters surged. This time the Black Tower was not swallowed down by the huge crocodile because there was a massive gap in between its teeth. The Black Tower had long since flowed out with the water and was immediately pushed out a few hundred meters away by the powerful waves. The Sun Moon Tear is really too powerful, Ling Han mused inside the Black Tower. If he had met with an opponent in the consummate level of Mountain River Tear, then even if he was no match for the other party, he would have still held up for a while somehow, just like when he had been simultaneously attacked by the 5 demonic beasts in the consummate level of Mountain River Tear. He had only spat out a few mouthfuls of blood back then. However, he believed that he would be instantly reduced to a mush of flesh and blood if he was really bitten by this colossal crocodile. The gap was really much, much too big. The huge crocodile had an obvious wrinkle in its brow. When one had reached the kind of cultivation level it was on, its intelligence was completely awakened, and it was not the slightest bit different from any humans. It was merely unwilling to take on human form in the deep sea. If not, others would really be unable to tell how it was different from other humans. A mere cultivator in Mountain River Tear was actually capable of evading its bite. Strange. Chapter 1038. Reappearance of the Jade Box. Chapter 1038. Reappearance of the Jade Box. The giant crocodile swam around the area for a while, but in the end it left with a wave of its strong tail causing water to surge. Ling Han came out of the Black Tower, planning to once again float to the sea's surface, yet suddenly felt alarmed. Immediately, he once again entered into the Black Tower. Boom! The giant crocodile actually charged back silently without any warning, and released a fierce attack towards him. So crafty and cunning. Ling Han shook his head. He definitely could not underestimate it just because it was a crocodile. To be able to cultivate to the Sun Moon Tear, how many thousands of years had this crocodile been alive? A demonic beast at Shattering Void Tear would awaken its intelligence completely. From that point onwards, it had lived so many years, so its intelligence would definitely not be inferior to any wise man's of the human race. Underestimating it was absolutely courting death. Who? But that pounce from the giant crocodile caused the violent surging of the sea waters. The Black Tower would not be affected by the special gravity of this place, and so it went with the natural flow, moving with the water. How powerful was the strength of a Sun Moon Tear cultivator! Furthermore, the pounce just now was planned out by the giant crocodile, so the power it unleashed was really very strong, pushing the Black Tower far away. In a few breaths' time, it had floated over 12 miles away. Ling Han waited for a while, and when he felt that it was calm, came back out of the Black Tower. He had not surfaced for long when a terrifying feeling was once again felt by him. He hurriedly ducked back into the Black Tower. Bang! True indeed, that gigantic crocodile had reappeared. Fuck! Why was this animal so determined not to let him escape? Ling Han was speechless. Had this massive crocodile discovered that he had disappeared in a way that was too unnatural, and sensed that there was an incredible treasure in his possession? If you want to follow, then just follow. I will go and be intimate with my wife, and you just wait patiently. He simply went to seek out Shui Yinyu, tormenting this seductive beauty so much that she was flushed red. She repeatedly called him a pervert, yet was also delighting in the treatment, half resisting and half welcoming it. Her beautiful eyes were like spring water, releasing an air of charm and captivation, stirring Ling Han's appetite greatly. At this time he did not have the time to care about the huge crocodile outside, and thus he did not realize that the black tower had actually been drawn into a channel with the flow of the water. This channel was unfathomably deep, and there was an endless darkness at the bottom. The large crocodile had swum here once before, but it was so scared that it turned with a sweep of its tail immediately and fled in the opposite direction. If Ling Han had also noticed this detail, perhaps he would have immediately come out of the black tower and would not have allowed the black tower to fall in no matter what. But now he was completely ignorant of the situation outside, just going with the flow of the water, which brought him into the endlessly deep abyss. Ling Han and Shui Yinyu were whispering sweet nothings to each other to pass the time, waiting for that giant crocodile to leave by itself out of impatience. He came out of the black tower. Fuck! He only felt as if all the bones inside his body had been shattered, immediately releasing cracking sounds. Why was it like this? Ling Han was confused. The water pressure here was extremely frightening, and this was something that he had been aware of. However, it was definitely not serious to this extent. Even if he channeled his origin power, it was useless this time. In an instant, over a dozen of his bones had been broken, and they even turned into shattered pieces. He could not hold on. He immediately entered into the black tower, and then channeled the indestructible heaven scroll. His bones began to heal, and after about 30 minutes he was completely recovered. Why has the pressure suddenly become so strong? Ling Han observed the outside world from within the black tower, but it was completely dark there, and the surroundings were completely different from before. Ahead of them, there was a somewhat weak light, flickering. Oh no, who knows where the waves created by that massive crocodile have drawn us to? Ling Han was lost for words. Previously, he merely went to be intimate with Shui Yinyu and paid completely no attention to the change in surroundings. Now he was actually brought into such a dangerous place. With such terrifying water pressure, all the bones in my body would probably be shattered in only a single breath's time. How am I going to float to the surface of the sea, then? Then, wouldn't that mean that I am eternally trapped in this place? Hold on, something ahead is glowing. Perhaps it will bring around a turn in luck. Now that things were like this, Ling Han could only try everything and anything in this desperate situation. He immediately came out of the black tower and caused waves with a palm strike. Then he quickly ducked back inside to allow the black tower to float towards that glowing spot by itself. It was naturally very slow. Furthermore, the water did not flow according to his will, and would frequently float in the wrong direction. Hence, the speed with which they were nearing that point of light was extremely slow. However, no matter how slow he was closing in on it. After about less than half a day, Ling Han could finally clearly see that point of light. It was actually a box. It was made of jade, and it was exuding a milky white light by itself. It was that box. Ling Han recognized it with a single glance. It was precisely the treasured box that Zhu Yueyin and Ho Yang had been fighting over. He had never thought that neither of them had gotten a hold of it, and this box had actually fallen into such a place. Am I fortunate or unfortunate, then? Ling Han scratched at his head. If he was lucky, then how would he have fallen into such a crisis? It was practically desperate straits. Then, if he was unlucky, well, the treasure that two great elites of heavenly body tier had been fighting over had actually fallen onto a place that was not far from him. Who cares if I'm lucky or unlucky? I'll first get a hold of the treasure. Otherwise, I would definitely be unlucky. Ling Han tried the same trick again and floated towards that box. He was slowly approaching. Finally, there was only an arm's distance left. Ling Han left the black tower in a flash and grabbed the box with a stretch of his arm. He was just about to retreat back into the black tower. However, just in that instant, a black gas also spread out. It had previously been hidden underneath the jade box, and now, like an octopus that had stretched out its tentacles, it wrapped around Ling Han. In that instant, a strong feeling of impending danger rose up in Ling Han's heart. He felt that if he was entwined by this thing, it would definitely be worse than suffering a palm strike from an elite of the Sun Moon tier. He quickly tried to hide back into the black tower, but that black-colored aura actually followed him closely like a shadow, sticking tightly onto the jade box. Schwa! It entered with it into the black tower. Furthermore, the black-colored gas was spreading out too quickly and had already entwined Ling Han's hand. Incomparably confusing thought was rushing up against Ling Han, causing him to completely lose all reason as if he was about to go mad. Duo! Small Tower appeared and shouted at him. The black gas dispersed like fog, instantly transforming into millions of silken threads. However, it was very stubborn, and a stream of black gas was still sticking onto Ling Han's hand and boring into his body. More and more, the whole black fog was shrinking back and gushing into Ling Han's body. Boom! A scene of battle arose in Ling Han's mind. Two great elites were battling among the stars. One attack was enough to even shatter the stars far away, causing the sun to eternally lose its brightness. He was astonished. What level were these elites at? The Genesis tier. One of the two fighting was an old man whose skin was completely gold in color. He was very fat and was all smiles. He also had a big, round tummy, and his earlobes were extraordinarily big. They actually touched his shoulder. His head, meanwhile, was completely bald. This caused Ling Han to recall one of the pirates he had encountered before. He was obviously a mad murderer, but when he practiced his cultivation technique, he actually had an air of dignity and stately grace. The feeling this old man gave him was the Simian, incredibly sacred air full of great mercy that transcended all life. Chapter 1039, Essence of the Demon Master. Chapter 1039, Essence of the Demon Master. On the other side of the battle was a man who looked to be only in his 40s. His upper body was bare, and all his muscles were bulging. However, what was unusual was the fact that there were actually multiple divine patterns on his skin. They did not seem to be engraved on his skin, but rather cast from some kind of metal. Not only was that the case, there were over a dozen sharp spikes growing on his back. They had all sprouted from his spine, and each spike was over 1/2 meter long, making for a frightening sight. A black chi entwined around his entire body, which gave Ling Han a feeling of familiarity. Demonic chi. Right, that was precisely demonic chi. This man was a great elite of the netherworld, and the golden-skinned old man was obviously one of the immortal realm. This was a battle between the two most powerful elites from the two realms. In their great battle, they could change the shape of their bodies according to their will. There were times when they were the size of ordinary humans, but there were other times when they were zillions of meters tall. With a stretch of their arm, they could easily grab a star nearby and smash it into the other. In the fierce battle between these two titans, the surrounding stars had been completely ravaged, multiple blinding spots of light lighting up the dark universe. Ling Han could feel his hair stand on ends just from watching. A whole star was smashed into bits, and there was a massive conflict involving the regulations of heaven and earth. That kind of destructive power was capable of utterly ruining everything. Even elites of the heavenly body tier would only be insta-killed in this kind of battle. However, this kind of conflict did not have the slightest negative effect on these two people. They merely continued such an utterly destructive battle and created even greater destruction. Yet, finally, the man from the netherworld was no match for his opponent. He was hit with a great attack, his body sent flying and directly shattering a star. Meanwhile, he was stuck to a shattered piece of the star and streaked towards the depths of the universe. This powerful move directly shattered his physical body and erased his divine sense as well. In theory, he was definitely and completely dead, with no hope of survival. He streaked through the universe alongside this shattered piece of star for who knew how long, and finally crashed into a planet, turning a plane into a massive sea. Star C. Ling Han finally understood. In the past, two ultimate elites had been battling, with one being defeated or even killed. His body, alongside a broken piece of a celestial body, crashed down right into Joint Peace Planet. This was the origin of the Star Sea. But what no one knew was that one of the fighters was actually a great elite from the Netherworld. Was he in the Genesis tier? Ling Han had not yet completed this thought when he saw a stream of chaos attack him, causing him to be filled with killing intent. Kill, kill, kill. He wanted to kill all the people of this realm. This was the remaining will of that great elite from the Netherworld. He had to have died long ago. But even if this kind of existence left behind merely a shattered piece of his will, that would be sufficient to affect any who came after. Now, the demonic chi was influencing Ling Han's heart, wanting to erase his original self and turn him completely into a demon. Ling Han humphed. If this was outside, he might be affected, but this was inside the Black Tower. The Genesis tier was indeed the greatest power of the current era, but this elite from the Netherworld had died who knew how many years ago. So how much power could he still have left? Ling Han drew upon the power of the Black Tower to resist the demonic chi. This was not his first time. Long ago, in the Devil's Sky mystery realm, he had already resisted the demonic chi of the Azura Demon Emperor. Of course, compared to this stream of demonic chi, the Azura Demon Emperor was practically trash. However, Ling Han's abilities had also changed massively since that time. Furthermore, the power of the Black Tower had also been restored quite a bit since then. Was that still not enough to suppress you? Ling Han whittled away endlessly at the demonic chi. The berserk, chaotic, and bloodthirsty factors had all been worn down, leaving behind only the purest essence, which sunk into Ling Han's dantian. At first, there was only a speck which turned into a ball, but it was about the size of an egg then. What was shocking was the fact that the essence was filled with power and could be absorbed by his mountain river. Ling Han immediately discovered that his second great mountain was growing at an astonishing pace. Going by that trend, he would be able to reach the middle stage of the medium extreme in about a month's time close to the late stage and form his second great river from there. This was really too astonishing. It had to be known that breaching every minor level in mountain river tier would take long millennia. Only Zhao Luin, Sha Yuan, and other such descendants that managed to obtain terrifyingly bountiful resources would be able to complete such accumulation in a short few centuries. But Ling Han, going by this kind of rate, he might be able to reach the peak stage of consummate level in only a few years. There is no need to be shocked. This is the lifetime essence of a demon master. Small Tower suddenly spoke up. Demon Master. Though Ling Han had expected this, he was still shocked. Demon Master, an equivalent to the saints of the immortal realm, was in existence in the Genesis tier. The will and physical body of the Demon Master has long been worn away, but Genesis tier is really too powerful. Even a portion of his body could last for a few 100 million years, influencing this sea, Small Tower said. Ling Han nodded. Precisely because of the effect of the corpse of the Demon Master, this sea was affected, creating such incredibly shocking gravity. In truth, that was a kind of power of regulation. An elite of the Genesis tier would affect the regulations of the heaven and earth, and who would not be influenced. No wonder demonic chi would seep out of that pit on the earth's core island. It had to be connected with this area of sea. Ling Han looked inward at his dantian. The last bit of essence from the dantian had turned into a black ball. It was so black that it would cause one to shudder inwardly. Furthermore, the endless power was also spreading out through this ball-like form, nurturing his physical body and raising his cultivation level. This was something that was taking place at all times, and going by that trend, it was enough to help him reach the sun-moon tier. That was natural. It was the lifetime essence of a demon master. What would be strange about it raising Ling Han to the sun-moon tier? On the contrary, if it were not for the fact that time had passed too quickly, and that it had lost a great portion of its essence, it might have even been capable of raising Ling Han to the heavenly body tier, or even the eternal river tier. Thankfully, the power of this essence is spreading out bit by bit. I would definitely explode from its force otherwise. A lingering fear rose up in Ling Han, being capable of raising his cultivation level to the sun-moon tier in a short time. How terrifying was this power! Also, this ball of power was staying in his body. It was like a time bomb. It would really keep one on edge and scared. However, the most important thing is not the quick boost to cultivation level, but rather the demon master's comprehension of the regulations of heaven and earth contained in the regulations of heaven and earth of the netherworld. I only need to reach a corresponding level, and I would be able to comprehend the regulations from both the immortal realm and the netherworld, which is the very most frightening part. But I heard that the two realms were opposed to each other, remaining in an inharmonious relationship. If I'm not careful, I may not be able to merge the regulations of the two realms. Instead, I myself would be driven mad. The regulations of the two realms would conflict, and I'd die. Forget it. This is something that I should consider only after I have stepped into the Genesis tier, so I'll just think about it later. According to that theory, the reason why this star sea would have such a powerful gravity field is because of the existence of the Demon Master. Now that I have absorbed the essence of the Demon Master, wouldn't this great sea be no different from any ordinary sea? Haha, I can leave this place. TSK, I am indeed very lucky. When I opened the sky, I was instilled with good fortune from the heaven and earth that is definitely no mere empty words. Furthermore, a thought flashed in Ling Han's head. The demonic power source in his Dantianthus was the name that he came up with for that lump of essence from the Demon Master. After all, if he called it essence, he felt that it was somewhat filthy. Immediately spread out threads of demonic chi. His air immediately changed, and there was a black gas circling around his whole body as if he had transformed into a demon himself. Haha, I can pass myself off as a person from the netherworld. I'll let the Azura Demon Emperor come take a look to see if there are any discrepancies. Ling Han cracked a grin. Chapter 1040, Invincible Sword Saint. Chapter 1040, Invincible Sword Saint. Ling Han called the Azura Demon Emperor over and said, "Watch me." "Yes, Master. Oh, great Master." The Azura Demon Emperor was working hard to improve his flattery skills, and he immediately started to perform with all his might. Master is truly becoming nobler and mightier by the day. When I stand before you, it's as if I'm standing before the sun. Before your brilliant radiance, I only want to kneel down and pray for your longevity. It is you who have brought this world light. It is you who have brought this world hope. Okay. Stop trying to flatter me. Tell me how I look now. Ling Han channeled the demonic power source, causing a black shadow to instantly envelop him. His appearance didn't change significantly, yet the aura radiating from his body seemed completely different from before. Master. The Azura Demon Emperor instantly plopped to his knees. The aura that radiated from Ling Han was far too terrifying, far surpassing that of any great elite that he had ever seen in the netherworld. This was the aura of a demon master. Master, could it be that you're a great elite from the netherworld? The Azura Demon Emperor asked, stuttering. No, of course I'm a human. It's just that I coincidentally managed to absorb the power of a demon master, Ling Han explained. Do I seem any different from beings of the netherworld right now? No, not in the least. The Azura Demon Emperor hurriedly shook his head and said, Master, you're fundamentally no different from beings of the netherworld. No. In terms of essence, you're in fact countless times nobler than them. Oh, dear Master, please allow little Azura to embrace your leg. Piss off. Ling Han kicked the Azura Demon Emperor aside. Do you think you can act cute just because you're in the body of a wolf? Ling Han waved his hand and threw the Azura Demon Emperor into some distant corner in the Black Tower. He then summoned the Jade Box over again. This Jade Box was extremely sturdy, and even elites at the Heavenly Body tier wouldn't be able to open it. If he were outside, Ling Han also wouldn't be able to open it. However, he was in the Black Tower right now. He examined the Jade Box and discovered that it was actually one seamless entity. It was like a naturally formed piece of jade, though its large size made it seem more like a box. He shook his head, unable to sense whatever lay inside the jade. Since I can't find any seams, I'll use brute force to open it. Ling Han used his fingers like a knife and dragged them across the jade. The boundless power of the Black Tower flowed into him, making him feel as if he were an omnipotent god. "Open," he said softly. "Pah!" The jade box was cut open by him, and sure enough it was hollow inside. There was only a piece of silver paper resting in it. Ling Han tried to pick it up, yet his expression changed drastically as a burst of sword light suddenly slashed over. It was as quick as lightning and impossible for him to dodge. Ding! Small Tower appeared and blocked the sword light, and then said, "What despicable deeds did you perform? Why are you targeted by everyone everywhere you go? Ha! Will you die if you don't bag me for a while?" Ling Han mulled over the sword strike as he walked over. That strike had been incredibly quick, yet that was only because he hadn't drawn on the power of the Black Tower to avoid it. After all, who would be wary of a piece of paper? Could this be the decree of a supreme being? Ling Han was prepared this time, and he summoned the power of the Black Tower around his body. Right now, perhaps only cultivators at the Genesis tier would be able to threaten him. He reached toward the piece of silver paper again. Shoo! Another burst of sword light slashed toward Ling Han. So fast! Although he was already prepared, Ling Han was still surprised by the astonishing speed of the sword light. In fact, it was even quicker than his annihilating Dragon Star arrow. This kind of speed was completely abnormal. Wong! The sword light ground to a halt as it arrived before Ling Han's body. This was unavoidable as Ling Han was like a true god in the space contained within the Black Tower. Even the speed of the sword light could do him no harm. Ling Han's heart thumped with excitement, and he exclaimed, "What on earth is this? How is it so domineering?" He believed that he had genuinely come across an extremely valuable item. As expected of a treasure fought over for by two heavenly body tier elites, he unfolded the silver paper and was faced with an even more relentless attack as countless bursts of sword light slashed over in unison. It was as if tens of millions of sword lights were surging over together. A wall of light appeared before Ling Han's body. It was formed due to the tremendous number and density of sword lights. "Vanish!" Ling Han humphed softly, and the bursts of sword light disappeared one after another, their might receding like a falling wave. "This feels amazing." Ling Han sighed in his mind. It would be great if I could physically summon the Black Tower. If I were able to do that, I would be able to force others into the Black Tower and then suppress them. If Empress Luanxing or the Emperor of the Eternity Sky Majestic Empire were trapped inside, their only option would be to submit to me. The piece of silver paper finally stabilized and stopped producing bursts of sword light. However, there wasn't a single word on the piece of paper. It was completely blank. This doesn't make any sense. There were so many layers of protection just for this piece of blank paper. Impossible. With a thought, Ling Han's divine sense entered the piece of paper. Countless pieces of information instantly surged into his mind. For form, sword technique. Eventually, only these 4 words remained in his mind. This piece of silver paper had been left by an elite who had lived a long, long time ago. He was a Grand Master of the Sword Tao, and people referred to him as the Invincible Sword Saint. The title Saint signified that he was a great elite who had reached the Genesis tier. Generally speaking, however, even those at the Genesis tier didn't dare refer to themselves as Sword Saint, Saber Saint, and so on. This was because such titles implied that one was the most powerful in a certain field. That being the case, one who claimed such a title could expect countless cultivators who were masterful in the same field to challenge them relentlessly. After all, no one would easily acknowledge such titles. Of course, the invincible Sword Saint hadn't given this title to himself. Rather, this had been a publicly acknowledged title. Moreover, not only was he titled a Sword Saint, but his title even had the word invincible in it, signifying that he was even more powerful. It was extremely likely that he was the strongest cultivator of the sword Dao in history. Meanwhile, his strongest sword technique was the four-form sword technique, which consisted of 4 parts: the fast technique, slow technique, chaotic technique, and calm technique. What was recorded on the piece of paper was the fast technique. Ling Han sighed with emotion after roughly experiencing the sword technique. As expected of a sword technique created by a great elite at the Genesis tier, this isn't something that ordinary people can practice. It was because this sword technique required its wielder to possess a powerful physique. As its name implied, the fast technique focused on speed. Its speed was incredible, so much so that it would surpass the limits of its wielder's cultivation level. This involved the breaking of regulations, which was why one needed to have an extremely strong physique. Otherwise, one's body would be obliterated by the regulations before they could even start to break the said regulations. This technique suits me perfectly. Ling Han was over the moon. The fast technique simply required one's physique to be at the same level as their cultivation level. However, Ling Han's physique was already a level above his cultivation level. This implied that his mastery of the fast technique could perhaps even surpass the invincible Sword Saint if they were to be compared at the same cultivation level. However, the invincible Sword Saint only achieved great accomplishment in the 4-form sword technique after advancing to the Genesis tier. This involves the regulations of the Genesis tier, so I might be unable to comprehend this sword technique's essence. Ling Han shook his head. His comprehension was indeed astonishing. Yet due to the restrictions posed by his cultivation level, he was still unable to comprehend techniques of the Genesis tier. Forget about it. Let me practice this sword technique and see how it goes. It's about time that I raised my sword skills. Chapter 1041 Fast Technique. Chapter 1041 Fast Technique. Ling Han was in no hurry to leave, so he stayed in the Black Tower to practice his newly learned sword technique. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. The regulations are broken, and that's the reason the speed of this technique can increase without limits. Those who face this sword technique have no chance of dodging it. Ling Han murmured to himself as his body flew through the air and his sword slashed down. His sword was as quick as lightning as he dashed forward. Yet he immediately felt a pang of pain shoot through his left leg. Lowering his head, he was shocked to discover that his left foot was still planted in its original location. His toes were all broken, and some were even twisted at unnatural angles. Gasp! Is this the consequence of breaking the regulations? Ling Han grimaced as he hurriedly reattached his left foot. He channeled the indestructible heaven scroll and healed the wound. I took the wrong path. Although the speed of my sword was quicker, the damage to my body was even greater. However, this is partly because I'm in the Black Tower, where my power is magnified immensely. If I were outside, I definitely wouldn't have been able to twist my bones to such a degree. I can't practice here. I have to go out first. Ling Han exited the Black Tower and immediately discovered that the devastating water pressure had already disappeared. In fact, it was somewhat wrong to say that it had disappeared. After all, the sea would naturally have some pressure at great depths. However, such pressure was like weightless fog to him right now, and it was completely unable to affect his godly bones. If that's the case, Will I be able to use my flight god tool as well? Ling Han retrieved the cloud-piercing shuttle and tried to steer it. Sure enough, the cloud-piercing shuttle split through the currents and arrived at the surface of the sea after a mere few seconds. It then shot into the sky. As expected, Ling Han let Shui Yanyu out and told her about what had just happened. Invincible Sword Saint. Shui Yanyu was baffled. It was clear that she had never heard of this name before. This wasn't surprising. Right now, the strongest cultivators on the Joint Peace Planet were only at the Heavenly Body tier. Perhaps there had been an ancient era when cultivation had prospered and great elites at the Genesis tier existed. However, the cultivation environment on the Joint Peace Planet was nowhere near as prosperous right now. Time could destroy everything, and even great elites at the Genesis tier couldn't escape the test of time. It's a pity that you're probably unable to learn this sword technique, Ling Han said with a sigh. He wasn't a selfish person, and would definitely share such benefits with his friends and family. Who said I can't learn it? Shui Yanyu said proudly. Ling Han chuckled and steered the cloud-piercing shuttle to a small island. He decided to camp here and master the fast technique first. He examined the fast technique with Shui Yanyu, yet she was at a complete loss, unable to make any sense of the technique. In fact, Ling Han was also baffled, though the demonic power source in his dantian would release some mystical power and help him overcome any problems and barriers that he came across. This was the regulation of heaven and earth corresponding to the Genesis tier. It was impossible for Ling Han to comprehend the technique by himself. Yet with the aid of the demonic power source, he was able to slowly master the fast technique. It was as if the comprehensions were being slowly forced into his brain. Thus, in theory, he lacked the ability to practice this technique. However, even the heavens had helped him, with the jade box coincidentally landing right where the demon master rested. Meanwhile, his black tower was able to suppress the essence of the demon master, and he was more so cultivating the indestructible heaven scroll. It was due to all of these conditions being satisfied that he was able to succeed. Even so, the pace of Ling Han's improvement was still as slow as a snail crawl. Ling Han felt extremely uncomfortable when he wielded his sword, with his hand, feet, waist, and every other part of his body all twisted at an angle that made it hard to apply strength. Anyhow, Strange couldn't begin to describe how this technique felt. He slowly overcame these problems, and the speed of his sword became faster and faster. However, the faster his sword became, the more burden was placed on his body. His godly bones would creak and groan with every strike that he performed, and if it were Shui Yanyu who was performing them, all of her bones would definitely be shattered. So fast! Shui Yanyu witnessed Ling Han's improvement, with the speed of his sword becoming quicker with each passing day. In the beginning, she could still follow Ling Han's sword light with her eyes. Now, however, she couldn't follow it at all. His hand would move, and his sword would instantly reach its target. That was how unbelievably quick it was. No wonder he was called the Invincible Sword Saint. This kind of sword technique simply defies nature. This is only one form of the four-form sword technique. How powerful is the slow technique, chaotic technique, and calm technique? Ling Han and Shui Yanyu were both extremely intrigued. After a month of practice, Ling Han finally attained small accomplishment in the fast technique. At the same time, he had also managed to advance to the middle stage of the medium extreme, thanks to the help of the demonic power source. In addition to that, he also used some spare time to practice his alchemy, finally succeeding in refining the heavenly pearl pill. "Let's go and kill some more pirates," Ling Han said with a laugh. After mastering the sword technique, he naturally had to improve his skills through battle. They rode on the cloud-piercing shuttle, unafraid of coming across Sun-Moon tier elites. After all, the cloud-piercing shuttle was fast enough for them to escape. The change in the star sea didn't affect the Yang clan's business. In fact, it was quite the contrary, with their business thriving even more. Following the disappearance of the extreme gravity field, more and more people ventured to the Star Sea to search for treasures. In the past, one had to be at the mountain river tier if they wanted to dive into the sea. Now, however, even those at the shattering void tier and heaven tier were able to dive into the sea. A depth of 3,000 meters posed absolutely no threat to them. Of course, the demonic beasts in the sea were still a huge threat. If one were to die in the mouth of a demonic beast while searching for treasures, they would only be able to blame it on their terrible luck. Without the disturbance of the Demon Master, the cloud-piercing shuttle was able to operate at its peak. Even if they wanted to circle the entire sea, it would only take them a day at most. As they had drifted in the sea for a few days after being shipwrecked, Ling Han had managed to learn a lot about the Yang clan's sea routes from Yang Taiching. Right now, he was also steering the cloud-piercing shuttle along those exact routes. There. He brought the shuttle down near a large ship that was currently engaged in an intense battle. It was a large ship owned by the Yang clan, guarded by an elite at the Sun-Moon tier. Thus, the pirates had naturally sent an elite at the same cultivation level. Right now, they were fighting a fierce battle on the surface of the sea. This would have been impossible in the past. However, without the extreme gravity field, how difficult would it be for Sun-Moon tier elites to walk across the sea? If they advanced one more tier, they would be able to soar through the sky. Ling Han stored the shuttle away and entered the battlefield with Shui Yenyu, both of them launching ferocious attacks at the pirates. The battle was extremely chaotic, so they didn't attract the attention of any elites, even though they had drawn the attention of some people when they had descended from the sky. Moreover, their cultivation levels were far too low, so they could be easily killed no matter which side they belonged to. Die, brat! A pirate immediately charged over with his saber. He was an elite at the peak stage of the medium extreme, so he charged over without any fears, fully confident that his advantage in cultivation level would allow him to easily crush Ling Han. Ling Han smiled faintly as he activated the fast technique. Pah! The pirate swung his saber. Yet, he was shocked to discover that his arm had already been severed from his body. He then saw his body separate into several pieces. He had actually been dismembered in a fraction of a second. Only then did he come to his senses. How come I can see myself being dismembered into several pieces? Could it be that I've already been decapitated? When did this happen? I didn't see him move at all. These were the last thoughts that flashed through the pirate's mind. Chapter 1042, Might of the Fast Technique. Chapter 1042, Might of the Fast Technique. Such an exchange naturally wouldn't attract much attention. After all, the battle was chaotic and their ranks were low. Ling Han was extremely satisfied. He could have killed his opponent with a single strike, yet after performing the first strike, he felt that the amount of time that had passed was far too short. Thus, he performed several more strikes, some to the left and some to the right. It looked as if he had only performed a single strike, yet in reality, he had actually performed a total of 11 strikes. I can still be faster, he said in his mind. Another pirate charged over and shouted, Detestable brat! Die! He was an elite at the early stage of the high extreme. Ling Han slashed his sword at the pirate. Pooh! Blood sprayed through the air, and the pirate instantly became a pile of cut-up flesh. What? After seeing 2 fellow pirates being insta-killed, the pirates in the surroundings finally took notice of Ling Han. 5 people instantly leaped over, one of them at the late stage of the high extreme, 2 at the early stage of the high extreme, and 2 at the peak stage of the medium extreme. There are 5 people, and one is even at the late stage of the high extreme, Ling Han mumbled to himself. Theoretically speaking, his battle prowess was also only at the late stage of the high extreme. As such, just a single pirate was enough to keep him occupied. However, there were 4 more pirates, so this was already enough to threaten his safety. Of course, This was before taking the fast technique into consideration. The 5 pirates sneered and said, "Brat, where did you come from? You actually dare to stick your nose in our matters? Hee, this lady over here is fairly beautiful. Fairly beautiful. Her beauty is absolutely bewitching. Kill that brat and capture the lady. We'll be able to have some fun with her." Definitely. The 5 pirates charged at Ling Han together. 5 people, huh? That's slightly challenging. Ling Han swung his sword. Shwa, shwa, shwa. Sword light flashed about at a speed so fast that one couldn't follow it with their naked eyes. Ling Han sheathed his sword, and it was as if he hadn't performed even a single strike. Pa, 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 pa. 4 of the 5 pirates collapsed, with only the pirate who was at the late stage of the high extreme still alive and standing. However, there was a deep gash on his neck, and it was clear that he had only just escaped being decapitated. A cold chill gripped the remaining pirate's heart. He hadn't actually noticed the sword light, and had only used his origin power and hand to protect his neck after sensing an approaching danger. This saved his life, yet 4 of his 5 fingers had still been sliced off. This cultivator is far too terrifying. What kind of sword technique is he using? It's completely capable of soundlessly killing someone. One had to realize that all 5 of the pirates possessed a cultivation level that was similar to or above that of Ling Han. In fact, the remaining pirate was a full minor level above Ling Han. However, 4 of the 5 pirates had been disposed of in an instant, and the remaining pirate had also had 4 of his fingers sliced off. This was in addition to being slashed across the neck and almost having his throat cut out. Is this brat a 5-star genius? No, no, no. Even if he's a 5-star genius, his battle prowess will only be on par with mine. How could he almost insta-kill me? Ling Han's hand was trembling slightly, and his breathing was also a little uneven. The origin power in his body was also a complete mess. The distinguishing feature of the fast technique was that it could break the regulations and generate a speed that exceeded one's cultivation level. Thus, the regulations of heaven and earth would also affect the wielder's body immensely. Almost, Ling Han murmured to himself. He had performed 5 strikes just then, and his intention had been to kill all 5 of the pirates. To his surprise, however, one of the pirates had managed to come out of it alive. He calmed his breathing and unleashed the fast technique again, targeting the last remaining pirate. The pirate was terrified, and all he could do was use his origin power to protect the weak points on his body. This was his only option, as he had absolutely no idea where Ling Han's attacks were going to come from or land. The problem was the area that he needed to defend was far too large, as he needed to spread his origin power over several fatal weak points. However, Ling Han could easily focus his attacks on a single point, rendering the pirates' relatively weak defenses completely useless. Pung, pung, pung. The speed of Ling Han's sword was incredibly fast. How incredibly fast! It was so fast that the pirate's origin power shield shattered after taking 2 strikes. Moreover, this shield needed time to regather, while the speed of Ling Han's sword strikes was far quicker than the speed at which the pirate's origin power shield could reassemble. The pirate was merely able to last for 3 breaths of time. Blood spurted through the air as the pirate gazed at his chest in disbelief. His heart had been pierced, and his dantian had also been shattered. Pum! He collapsed, never to wake up again. Meanwhile, Ling Han was panting heavily. The fast technique was extremely taxing on one's origin power and stamina. Moreover, it was also extremely detrimental to one's body. As such, it placed a tremendous burden on whoever wielded it. Detestable brat! Another pirate leaped over, this one at the consummate level of the mountain river tier. His hair was a mess, and his face was chubby and full of excess flesh. There was a huge cleaver in his hand, and not a single part of him looked like an immortal level elite. Instead, he looked like a swine butcher. Divine patterns lit up on the blade of the cleaver as the pirate swung it at Ling Han with both hands. The divine patterns dazzled with a radiance that made it impossible to trace the cleaver's trajectory. Consummate level. Ling Han was itching to test his mettle. He took a deep breath before activating the fast technique and unleashing a flurry of attacks. In terms of speed, the fast technique was most likely the quickest in the world. At the very least, no immortal at the consummate level of the mountain river tier could beat Ling Han in speed. Thus, the disheveled pirate could only switch from attack to defense. He held his cleaver across his body, blocking a good half of it. At the same time, his body radiated with a faint, golden glow that pushed his defensive prowess to extreme. He didn't stick only to defense, clenching his left hand into a fist and ferociously swinging it at Ling Han. Pum! The two of them exchanged a strike. A gash appeared on the pirate's neck, though it wasn't very deep. Meanwhile, Ling Han had been struck on his shoulder, which had clearly caved in under the impact. Truth be told, Ling Han had definitely been injured more in this exchange. However, the pirates and sailors who had witnessed this exchange were all immensely shocked. Ling Han was only at the middle stage of the medium extreme, while his opponent was already at the middle stage of the consummate level. There was a whopping 8 subminor levels between their cultivation levels. Even if the pirate was no prodigy, Ling Han had still managed to fight almost 8 stars above his level. 8 stars. Who could believe this? Who dared to believe this? The pirate was both shocked and infuriated as he felt the gash on his neck. Although it looked like he had the upper hand and had been able to deal his opponent more damage, Ling Han's strike would have been able to end his life had it been that little bit stronger. Cold sweat poured down the pirate's body as he realized that he had taken a trip to death's door and back. "I can't let you live," he roared. His cleaver dazzled brilliantly as he swung it at Ling Han. He was going to kill Ling Han while the latter was still weak and injured. Otherwise, he would definitely be no match for Ling Han in a few years' time. Much to his shock, however, he immediately noticed that Ling Han's shoulder was healing at an unbelievable rate. Pooh! He was so shocked that even his attack ground to a halt. His brain was ringing with disbelief. Such a powerful physique, coupled with such an astonishing regeneration ability. Is this bred a beast? Come again, Ling Han said with a chuckle. Fear flashed across the pirate's face. His cultivation level was higher than Ling Han, and his strength was also greater than Ling Han. However, there was terror in his heart, and he had absolutely no confidence in winning anymore. A middle-aged pirate appeared and humphed. What an arrogant brat! His had a skinny build, yet there was an image of a red sun behind his back. Sun Moon Tier. Chapter 1043. Slap across the face. Chapter 1043. Slap across the face. Ha! Shicheng, your opponent is me. There was a loud laugh, and a heavily built male appeared before Ling Han. His left hand was ordinary, yet his right hand was surprisingly large. Moreover, it was as black as ink and radiated with the luster of metal. Yang Xian, is this brat a new prodigy of your Yang clan? The pirate, who had been referred to as Shicheng, asked. His voice rumbled like thunder. Yang Xian was none other than the Sun Moon Tier elite of the Yang clan, standing before Ling Han at this moment. His right hand was significantly larger. Who knew if this was because of his brilliant self-pleasure skills? So what if he is? So what if he isn't? Either way, it's none of your business, Yang Xian said coldly. His pitch-black right hand started to glow and radiate a terrifying aura as strands of divine patterns appeared, forming an ancient image. It looks like my guess was correct. An almost tangible killing intent seeped from Shi Cheng's body as he glared at Ling Han coldly. This youth was extremely dangerous, and he had to dispose of him as soon as possible. Otherwise, it would be too late for him to express regret when this youth grew up and came looking for revenge. Yang Xian raised his right hand and pointed it at Shi Cheng, saying, "The gravity field over the Star Sea has already disappeared, and the good days for you guys have already come to an end. Prepare to die. Ha 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 ha. Keep dreaming." Shi Cheng raised his hand, and a burst of sword light instantly raced toward Ling Han. "You dare!" Yang Xian slapped his right hand down, and the divine patterns on his hand instantly transformed into a length of chain that whipped toward Shi Cheng's body. Ferocious waves, domineering flash. Shi Cheng roared. A wave surged from his body and slammed into the divine pattern chain, causing it to falter momentarily. Seizing this opportunity, Shi Cheng charged forward and stabbed his sword at Ling Han's chest. Yang Xian was slightly astonished by what had happened. He had fought Shi Cheng several times before and knew that the ferocious wave's domineering flash was his trump card. He could only use it a limited number of times in a set time period, so Yang Xian was caught off guard upon seeing Shi Cheng unleash this attack again so soon. His killing intent was far too resolute. Meanwhile, Ling Han was a complete stranger to Yang Xian, and Yang Xian also knew that Ling Han was not a passenger on his ship. So, how could he protect him with all of his strength? Their attitudes were completely different, so the effectiveness of their techniques was naturally different as well. Shi Cheng broke through Yang Xian's defenses and dashed toward Ling Han. How could a cultivator at the medium extreme of the mountain river tier fight an elite at the sun-moon tier? There was no way this was possible, even if Shi Cheng was only at the middle stage of the low extreme. This battle would definitely be over in a single strike. The sword reached its target. Wang. Shi Cheng's sword pierced Ling Han's chest, directly where his heart was. Then everything stopped. Pa! There was a crisp sound, and everyone saw Ling Han aggressively slap Shi Cheng across the face. It was crisp and it was loud. The battles all stopped at this instant, and everyone turned their widely open eyes toward Ling Han. Their mouths gaped so wide open that even a fist could probably fit inside. Holy fuck! What just happened? Are my eyes going blurry? Why do I feel like I saw Captain Shi Cheng being slapped across the face? Fuck! Who is that brat? He's far too freakish. He actually slapped the captain of the pirates. Is he really only at the mountain river tier? When he was fighting just then, I only saw 2 mountains and a river, which means that he hasn't even reached the late stage of the medium extreme yet. How is that possible? Even Yang Xian spluttered and coughed, unable to accept that Ling Han was only at the mountain river tier. Ling Han flapped his hand and said, "Your face is truly thick. Even my hand hurts after slapping you." He had used the fast technique when slapping Shi Cheng, meaning that the speed of his hand had been incredibly quick. Meanwhile, Shi Cheng had been extremely careless, as he had thought that his sword strike would be able to insta-kill Ling Han, who would raise their guard up when facing a dead person. However, Shi Cheng was at the sun-moon tier, after all, and so he had been able to protect his face with some origin power, even though he hadn't been able to dodge Ling Han's strike. Thus, even though Ling Han had slapped Shi Cheng, it was actually the former who had been hurt more. Shi Cheng was slightly dazed. Then his face immediately became pale before flushing red with anger. In the end, it turned dark with fury. Fuck! Even if he had used his iron face technique to shatter Ling Han's hand, that was still an unbelievably embarrassing sight. He, an elite at the sun-moon tier, had actually been slapped by a mere ant at the mountain river tier. How utterly humiliating. Shi Cheng's hair stood on ends, and he shouted, "Brat, I'm going to kill you!" Right now, he didn't have the patience to mull over why his strike had failed to kill Ling Han, and why Ling Han had managed to slap him instead. The main point was that he had been slapped. He raised his sword and slashed it at Ling Han. Ding! Yang Xian dashed over and grabbed the blade of Shi Cheng's sword with his large and powerful right hand. Pung, pung, pung. A burst of power surged out, and the deck of the ship instantly started to undulate like waves. The people on the deck were all tossed into the air and thrown into the water. Fortunately, the sea didn't possess the uncanny gravity field anymore, meaning that the people who had been tossed overboard wouldn't need to worry about drowning. They were quickly able to stand above the water. Killing intense soared from Shi Cheng's body, and he shouted, "Fuck off! Otherwise, I'll kill you along with the brat." Ever since his cultivation level had improved, he had never been slapped by anyone again, much less by an ant at the mountain river tier. If he didn't kill Ling Han, he would never be able to raise his head again, of course. Even if he killed Ling Han, he would undoubtedly still become the butt of many jokes. Ha 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 ha. Yang Xian roared with laughter and said, "Shi Cheng, everyone here saw you being slapped. Perhaps you want to kill everyone present?" He shook his head, and his laughter became even louder. "I'm truly embarrassed to be associated with you. You're an elite at the Sun Moon tier, yet you were actually slapped by someone at the Mountain River tier. You still dare to speak?" Shi Cheng was wild with rage, and his sword slashed toward Yang Xian without regard for anything else. Each strike was performed with his life on the line, and it was as if he wanted to kill Yang Xian, even if it meant sacrificing his own life. Yang Xian didn't dare tease him anymore. He wasn't planning to die alongside Shi Cheng, so he naturally wouldn't provoke him any further. However, Shi Cheng had truly gone berserk with anger, and he was indeed planning to kill everyone present to hide his embarrassment. Die! 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 Shi Cheng unleashed his full strength. Damn it! Yang Xian hadn't anticipated that Shi Cheng would be so rash. He was under immense pressure right now, and a slip was all it would take to end his life. Most importantly, he had never planned to fight with his life on the line. Thus, his strikes were all full of hesitation, and as a result, he was forced onto his back foot. Ghost Shadow Step. Shi Cheng unleashed another trump card, and his body became like an illusory shadow while the red sun behind his back became incredibly dazzling. In fact, it became even more dazzling than the genuine sun in the sky. Holy **T. Yang Xian's expression changed drastically. Shi Cheng had drawn on the power of his sun and moon, the essence power of elites at the Sun-Moon tier. By drawing on this power, it was clear that Shi Cheng was truly fighting with his life on the line. Fuck off or die. Shi Cheng roared coldly. In fact, he hadn't fully lost his reason yet. He had merely entered this state to show Yang Xian his determination. If Yang Xian dared to block him, he would drag Yang Xian down with him, even if this meant dying. Yang Xian's mind whirred as he analyzed the situation. If Ling Han were a disciple of the Yang clan, he would definitely give his all to protect him, even if he had to sacrifice himself. However, it was a shame that Ling Han was no disciple of the Yang clan, potentially sacrificing his life for an outsider. It wasn't worth it. Chapter 1044, Yielding. Chapter 1044, Yielding. The expression on Yang Xian's face clearly indicated that he wanted to retreat. Ling Han was a stranger who had joined in on the battle, so there was no need for him to risk his life to help him. In any case, the Yang clan didn't hate pirates as much as outsiders thought they did. That was right. The Yang clan and pirates were indeed mortal enemies. In the millions of years of their existence, the Yang clan had lost countless clan members to the pirates. However, without the existence of the pirates, would cultivators still need the Yang clan to protect them? Without the pirates, how could the Yang clan earn enough income to support their clan? When all hares were killed, the hounds would be stewed and eaten one. This was a concept that even mortal humans knew. So how could the Yang clan not understand this? Thus, the Yang clan only ever sought to protect their own ships. As for exterminating pirates, they had never been proactive or keen to do it. After all, they would be hurting their own interests if they proactively hunted pirates. Of course, Yang Xian couldn't make his retreat when facing the pirate too obvious. Thus, he could only decrease his strength slowly and eventually reveal a flaw, and then finally let Xiqing pass him. Ling Han naturally noticed it, and he sneered in his mind. He then turned to Yang Xian and said, "Thank you for helping, senior. Wife, it's time for us to retreat." "Xiao." Before Yang Xian could even reply, he pulled Shui Yenyu into the cloud-piercing shuttle with him and immediately soared into the sky. "Thick face, I'll come to slap you again some other time." Ling Han didn't forget to tease Xiqing as he left. Xiqing seethed with rage and violently leaped up, reaching a height of almost 300 meters. He wanted to jump onto the cloud-piercing shuttle and pummel Ling Han into the sea. However, once the shuttle was activated, its speed would be 4 times that of ordinary Sun-Moon tier elites. That being the case, how could the enraged Xiqing catch up to them? Xiqing fell from the sky and landed in the sea with a loud plop. SH*T, SH*T. He cursed loudly as he trained his gaze on Yang Xian. If this person hadn't blocked him, how could the detestable little brat have had enough time to retrieve his flight god tool and escape? Fuck! Yang Xian swore in his mind, and even cursed Ling Han as well. It was clearly that brat who had caused such trouble, so why did he have to be dragged into it? Although he had been locked in battle with Xiqing just then, they had merely been preventing each other from intervening in the other battles. At their cultivation level, who hadn't cultivated for millions of years, and who didn't value their own life immensely. However, Xiqing only cursed for a short while before charging toward Yang Xian. Flames of rage flickered in his eyes. He, an elite at the Sun-Moon tier, had actually been slapped by a junior cultivator at the Mountain River tier. How could he not be furious? Ling Han circled around the ship once before casually flying off into the distance. Shui Yenyu pointed at Yang Xian and said, "That person is so shameless." She appeared extremely angry. They were helping the Yang clan. Yet the Yang clan actually allowed the pirate elite to attack Ling Han. This left her extremely disappointed. It's fine when you get used to it. Ling Han didn't think much about what had just happened. Most people only cared about their own benefits, so how could he expect a complete stranger to sacrifice his life for him? Anyhow, his aim hadn't been to help the Yang clan anyway. He was merely here to kill some pirates. Shui Yenyu remained angry for quite a while. She had lived in the imperial capital her entire life, so it was no surprise that her mindset and experiences were nowhere near Ling Han's. After a while, she suddenly shuffled over and said, "Close your eyes." "Why?" Ling Han turned around to face her. Shui Yenyu was slightly irritated and said, "I told you to close them, so just close them." "Aren't you afraid that I'll fly at random and crash the shuttle?" Ling Han asked with a chuckle, "Are you going to close your eyes or not?" "Fine. If wife wants me to close them, I'll close them." Ling Han shut his eyes and immediately sensed a shadow moving toward him. Then, a pair of warm and soft lips pressed onto his lips. Ling Han was slightly astonished. "Shui Yenyu actually kissed me." Although Shui Yenyu was charming and naturally seductive, her personality was actually quite cold and aloof. Even though Ling Han had been hugging, kissing, and groping her this entire time, she had always been passively receiving it. However, she had taken initiative to kiss him now. Strange. He immediately opened his eyes, only to see that Shui Yenyu's eyes were shut. Her face was flushed red as she clumsily kissed him. She was clearly in heat, with her breathing heavy and her neck an alluring shade of pink. This pink stretched all the way to her jade-like chest, though it was a shame that her chest was hidden by her clothes, hiding her stunning body from him. "Wife, have you finally decided to have kids with me?" Ling Han asked a mood-killing question. Shui Yenyu rolled her eyes at him. She was feeling excited after recalling how Ling Han had slapped Xiqing across the face just then. What Mountain River tier cultivator could slap a Sun-Moon tier elite? Her body would go weak with excitement whenever she recalled that sight, and it was as if some kind of feeling were about to burst out of her body. This made her want to hug Ling Han tightly and give herself to him. Yet, for some reason, Ling Han was hell-bent on ruining the atmosphere. "Wife, your kissing skills aren't up to scratch. Let me teach you." Ling Han pulled Shui Yinyu over and leaned in for a deep kiss. Shui Yinyu immediately started to moan, and she placed her hands on Ling Han's chest in an attempt to push that pervert back. However, her strength became weaker and weaker, and in the end, she started to reply fervently as her arms wrapped around Ling Han's neck. This man could easily cause her body to heat up in excitement. "Damn pervert," she murmured. "I hate you." "Why do you hate me?" Ling Han nibbled her earlobe as he played with her breasts. "I hate you because you caused someone to enter my heart. I can't forget them no matter what." Shui Yinyu aggressively bit Ling Han's shoulder. However, Ling Han's skin was too thick and his flesh was too tough, so there was no way she could break his skin. A rush of emotions surged through Ling Han's mind. Is this seductive beauty confessing her love to me? He cupped Shui Yinyu's beautiful face and said seriously, "I'll definitely treat you well for all eternity." "Humph, you still have 2 other lovers," Shui Yinyu said with jealousy. Ling Han chuckled guiltily. Although he had 3 wives-in-waiting including Shui Yanyu had many more lovers in addition to that. He was smart enough not to continue with this topic and said, "Let's swap the position. We'll go kill some more pirates as well." Shui Yanyu was absolutely stunned. This damn pervert actually said something as vulgar and as unrefined as position one before me? I'm done for. If I really end up with him, will I also become like this in the future? The 2 of them flew around the Star Sea on their cloud-piercing shuttle, exterminating all of the smaller groups of pirates. When they came across Sun Moon tier pirates, however, they would flee into the distance. They came and went as they pleased, and this caused all the pirates to detest them from the bottom of their hearts. 10 or so days passed, and the number of pirates that had died by their hands had already exceeded 100. Moreover, Shui Yanyu had finally broken through to the medium extreme. If news of this traveled back to the Scarlet Heaven Academy, it would definitely cause quite a large stir. Her cultivation speed was indeed much slower than Ling Han's. However, she had still managed to advance 1 minor level in only a dozen or so years. This was still an astonishing feat. Of course, this was partly because she had obtained several mountain river stones, which sped up the accumulation of her cultivation. This was in addition to the heavenly chi pills that Ling Han had continuously given her, which allowed her to reach the peak stage of the low extreme in an extremely short amount of time. In the past few days, she had also fought many intense battles, and her own comprehension ability was also fairly outstanding. Thus, she was finally able to achieve this important breakthrough. Chapter 1045 Bad News. Chapter 1045 Bad News. Ling Han decided that they would return after Shui Yanyu successfully endured her heavenly tribulation. They had already killed enough pirates, and the pirates had all become afraid of their guerrilla tactics anyway. Now, all of the pirate ships would have at least 1 Sun Moon tier elite guarding them. This deterred Ling Han from attacking them, as the gulf in power between those at the Sun Moon tier and Mount River tier was far too great. Just small mistake could get him killed. Even the Black Tower and cloud-piercing shuttle wouldn't be able to help him much. Moreover, how could he expect fortunate coincidences like Shiqing stabbing his absolute beginning Stenito happen every time? Shui Yanyu wasn't Ling Han, and she certainly didn't possess a freakishly powerful physique like him. Thus, although she passed her heavenly tribulation, it was still fairly difficult, and left many scorches and burns on her body. She looked extremely disheveled and in a very sorry state. This was already because Ling Han had used the absolute beginning stone to help her. If it weren't for this, her condition would have been even worse. However, the benefits that she received far outweighed the difficulties that she suffered. After reaching the medium extreme of the mountain river tier, one would possess a lifespan of 200,000 years. This meant that her appearance wouldn't age for at least another 50,000 to 60,000 years. In other words, her appearance would remain at the golden age of around 20 years old. To beautiful women like her, this was one of the most valuable things they got out of cultivation. Moreover, with her talents, and with the help of Ling Han's pills, perhaps she would be able to reach the high extreme in another several hundred or several thousand years. If that were the case, her beauty would be maintained for another tens of thousands of years. The happiness she derived from this fact even exceeded the happiness that she derived from gaining more strength. This made Ling Han sigh with emotion. Men and women have very different mindsets indeed. He couldn't help but check himself out in a mirror. He found that the person who looked back at him looked even younger than 20. There was nothing he could do about this. The speed of his cultivation was insanely fast in this life, so his appearance was still far from becoming mature. Ling Han involuntarily sighed and said, "I look too much like a youth." He had been over 200 years old in his previous life, and although he had still been far from reaching old age, he at least looked like a mature young adult of around 25 to 26 years old. It wasn't like now, where he looked so young that he could barely accept it himself. Shui Yinyu rolled her eyes at him and said, "Are you dissatisfied because I'm too old?" "Hee, how are you too old, wife? Your skin is so soft and delicate, and I can't get enough of it, even if I gaze at it hundreds of times a day." Ling Han had finally learnt some flowery words, though the most important skill he possessed was still his kissing skills. He leaned over and kissed Shui Yinyu until her eyes became hazy and her body became limp. "Damn pervert! So be it, if you kiss me normally, but why do you have to suck on my saliva? That's filthy." Shui Yinyu continued to scold him and said, "And your hands as well. Why do you have to grab my breasts?" "Oh." Ling Han nodded and moved his hands down a little, placing them on her firm bottom. Shui Yinyu was about to go crazy. "Are you doing this on purpose?" "Damn pervert." She slapped a label onto Ling Han's behavior. "What an unjust accusation. I've got to put my hands somewhere when I kiss you, right? It's only normal that I put them where I like most." Ling Han immediately acted as if he had been wrongly accused and said, "This is my favorite, and this is my second favorite place." He pointed at Shui Yenyu's shapely breasts and bottom, respectively. Shui Yenyu flushed red with embarrassment, yet she felt a slight sense of pride. She was also extremely happy with her development in these two areas. However, it was a shame that they would end up pleasing that damn pervert more. The two of them set off for the imperial capital. They weren't in a hurry to return, and Ling Han would also refine a large number of heavenly pearl pills each day. He would sell them when they got back, and then use the money he made to buy more materials, so he could start refining the level 3 divine, Pill the Jade Heaven pill. The higher the level of a pill, the more time was needed to refine a cauldron of it. At the same time, the profit would also increase dramatically. However, although this seemed simple, there weren't many people who could actually refine higher level pills. Most alchemists were extremely ordinary and would only be able to refine level 1 or level 2 divine pills in their entire life. Thus, there were far more level 1 and level 2 divine pills, and their prices were also the lowest. Starting from level 3 divine pills onwards, the price of each pill would increase significantly. Right now, Ling Han was merely earning his school fees. They took half a month to arrive back at the imperial capital, and they entered the city gates using their identity token from the Scarlet Heaven Academy. Shui Yenyu returned to the Shui clan first, but she still needed to return to the academy later to report that she had advanced to the medium extreme. It was time for her to move to the medium extreme division. In the meantime, Ling Han returned to the academy by himself. He tried to stay extremely low-key. However, he was famous throughout the Scarlet Heaven Academy and was even famous throughout the entire imperial capital. So, how could he remain low-key? Numerous people came to visit him the very next day. For example, the delicate and princess-like Li Weiwei came, and his good friends in Lin Yu and Ma Xing also came. There were also those who dreamed of becoming famous through one battle and came to challenge him to a duel. Ling Han chuckled and said, "Challenge me to a duel? No problem. I'll go if they can pay a fight fee of 800 to 900. Some of the challengers were unhappy about this and grumbled. Wasn't it only 10 true origin stone before? This is absolute bullsh *t. How can the price suddenly inflate by so much? I wasn't this famous before, so my appearance fee was naturally lower. However, the situation is completely different now. If I weren't this famous, you guys wouldn't be lining up to challenge me. Either, am I correct? If you can't afford it, then go away and stop annoying me. Otherwise, prepare 10,000 true origin stones and line up to register your challenge." Ling Han turned to the Azura Demon Emperor and said, "Little Azura, help me record their details." Woof! The Azura Demon Emperor was in a puppet wolf's body right now, so he obediently barked in reply. What was dignity? Could dignity fill one's belly? The challengers were all seething with anger. Some people even rushed over and tried to use force, yet they were all easily suppressed by the Azura Demon Emperor. He had a battle prowess at the late stage of the consummate level, so there weren't many students in the academy who could defeat him in a fight. "Stupid blockhead, you left for so many days. Do you still remember me, your master?" Li Weiwei was extremely tsunderish. She crossed her arms before her chest, which she was trying very hard to push out. It was a shame that she was fairly flat-chested. Although she tried very hard to emphasize her chest, there was only a very small effect. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "Congratulations on reaching the mountain river tier." Li Weiwei instantly became happy upon hearing this and said, "That's right, I've already refined all of the mountain river stones and reached the middle stage of the low extreme." However, her mood immediately fell again, and she said, "It's a shame that I still haven't been able to comprehend the true secrets of the mountain river tier yet." "Don't beat yourself over it," Ling Han consoled. "There's still quite a while before you reach the peak stage of the low extreme, so you can take your time to comprehend it. Anyhow, you're already at the mountain river tier, so it should be much easier to work back on your comprehensions." Li Weiwei shot him a glare and said, "So what you're trying to say is that I'm stupid for still not being able to comprehend it?" Ling Han was rendered speechless. If you truly want to twist my words like that, there's really nothing more I can say. If it were Shui Yanyu, he would still try to coax her a little. However, he had no intention of furthering his relationship with Li Weiwei, so he naturally had to remain a little more distant. He had absolutely no intention of flirting with this princess-like woman. "That's right." Li Weiwei's expression suddenly became serious, and she said, "I've got some bad news for you. Zhao Luin has broken through to the Sun Moon tier." "So fast!" Ling Han was slightly surprised. Even for a prodigy like Zhao Luin, advancing one minor level still required at least several dozen years of cultivation. As such, it would be even harder to advance one major tier. How did he break through to the Sun Moon tier so soon? This is extremely abnormal. Li Weiwei clicked her tongue and said, "I heard father say that great General Zhao obtained some kind of supreme divine pill after risking his life and entering an ancient ruin. Great General Zhao was severely wounded as a result, and even our great empress was alarmed." Ling Han stroked his chin and thought, this was indeed very bad news.